you go after this guy?
He's like, hey man, want a flower?
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason why.
He's like a hippie.
Why would you go after this guy?
Little weekend, yep.
Come on!
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason why.
Why would you go after this guy?
He's like, hey man, want a flower?
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason why.
He's like a hippie.
Why would you go after this guy?
Little weekend, yep.
Come on!
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason why.
Why would you go after this guy?
He's like, hey man, want a flower?
Why would you go after this guy?
There's a reason why.
He's like a hippie.
Why would you go after this guy?
All right. We are live. It's been a busy week for myself, working on 101 ways to respect the Quran, and busy week for Mary with remodeling. So we were not able to have a show during the week, but here we are on Saturday. Glad you are able to join us. I want to welcome you all back to Reasoned Answers, your home for the
crackhead clown individuals.
Artemis decided to move on me, and right as we're starting here, I'll get the other cat cam on in just a second. But first, I wanted to say hello to everyone. 5 people disliked this stream before we even started. Seems that we still have some J fans subscribed, so I'm glad. Assuming that they tune in and didn't just, leave a dislike and then never tune in. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad to be able to spread the truth here. Thank you for disliking the stream and letting me know that you're still watching the channel. I appreciate that.
Because thank you for letting me know that there are still people who fall for this, because this is really, really, really shameful what Jay Smith has been saying. And it needs to stop. He needs to stop. And one way or another, he is going to stop, either because he realizes, or people in his life realize, that they are hurting him by continuing to support him in doing this, and that he needs to do something else with his time. Because, of course, who is his number one that he mentions more than anyone else of all the scholars that is his reference? Who is it?
Well, that would be Patricia Crone, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes.
Listening to Jay, you'd think that Patricia Crone was his best friend, perhaps. Certainly a major advisor in his life. The primary source for how he realized that Islam is that the history of Islam is total myth, and that nothing existed until the 9th century. I think I've heard him say that Patricia Crone knows 14 languages and she studied every map in the world. 15. Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Not
she
14,
knows 15
15
languages, and she has studied every math in the world. Let's see if I can. Oh my goodness, my browser is wanting to crash at this moment. If I can bring it up, I'll even share that image of when he always loves to say she reads and writes 15 ancient languages. Where did you get that number, Jay? Which 15 languages? The ancient languages that she reads, because they're all ancient languages specifically. So the ancient languages that she reads and writes, according to him, he has only listed 3 ever. One is Syro-Phoenician, or excuse me, I'm confusing that with the Bible. Syro-Aramaic. Syro-Phoenician is actually something. Syro-Aramaic, which is not anything. That is a term that was made up by the author of Luxembourg, the author of the conspiracy theory book that does not hold up to scrutiny. He invented the word Syro-Aramaic and used that to refer to all Aramaic dialects, including Syriac. That's not a language. So why is he saying that she reads and writes a language that doesn't exist? He says Nabatean Aramaic because he really likes the idea of Nabatean Aramaic. Jay Smith does not know what Nabatean Aramaic is. She does, however, she did learn Syriac, which would also, whenever you study Syriac, you effectively learn enough to get along fine in Aramaic too, because they're just different dialects of the same language. But she did not ever explicitly study Nabatean Aramaic. She studied Syriac. She studied Arabic. And, oh goodness, she studied one other language early on in her career. And then she knows Latin because everybody who works in this has to know Latin. And she might know some Greek. The third language that he loves to say is Akkadian. In what universe would she have learned Akkadian? There's no evidence for it. There's no source for it, except for J. Smith's mind. He just made it up because he likes the sound of the word Akkadian, I guess. She doesn't work in a time period in which Akkadian was an existing language. She has never worked in the Iron Age. She has only worked in the later part of the Classical Age and late antiquity. That's the only time period she worked. Why would she work in a language that was dead many centuries before her area of interest? So he even puts up on slides, she knows 15 languages. Why? Why would you put that on the slide? Why would you make that
because it sounds impressive.
It sounds impressive. And the point of it is to make you shut up so that you feel
if you don't know 15 languages, then you can't question
anything against this, because J. Smith is definitely telling you what she says and what she knows and what she believes. He definitely isn't misrepresenting this wildly. And he's another. He likes to go to Robert Hoyland, whom he credits with knowing 18 languages. I guarantee the man does not know 18 languages. Someone else, I doubt J. Smith has done this because I have been unable to find any research that J. Smith has actually done. Someone else may have counted up, but it wouldn't even make 18 for that. I have no idea how he got 18 languages. But Robert Hoyland absolutely does not speak 18 languages, yet he says this. So he met her 1 week before his debate, had one meeting with her in her office in Cambridge, where she gave him 10 points to challenge on, where there were open questions. In 1995, she felt that there were still 10 areas with open questions about the Islamic history. And he claims, and he changes his claim a whole bunch of times, that she was either his advisor, or he calls it supervisor, that may be the UK term, or co-advisor when he started his thesis. He went to a different university, so she could not have been his advisor. She could have said, sure, I'll be your co-advisor, but she left the UK within less than 2 years after he met her. He did not complete the thesis that he had started there if he began writing on it at all. But he wants to make it play as if he has this great relationship with her. He also tells a story in which she says, Che, you're so important because you can say things that I, as an academic, can't say because I have a chair to protect. She didn't have a chair at that time. She never had a chair when she was in the UK. Why would she say to him, I can't say this, but I can empower you to say this, if she did not have the position that she is supposedly in? He tells this story 18 times. I have counted on videos posted on his site. He has told the story of her saying, I have a chair to protect 18 times. She had no chair. She was not even a full professor. She was an associate professor. She had moved up from being an assistant professor at Oxford. At Oxford, her career stalled. For whatever reason, your career could stall for political reasons, because of who else happened to be, there are all these people with seniority, there's no place to move up to. All kinds of reasons, your career can stall. Her career stalled when she was at Oxford. So eventually she switched to Cambridge. At first it was a lateral switch, but not almost immediately, but 5 years later, she got a promotion from assistant professor up to associate professor. She was there at associate professor level for 2 more years, and then she went to Princeton, where she got, guess what, a chair. She got a chair at Princeton, and so she, she got a very distinguished chair at Princeton, and so she happily made the jump across the pond to take this very distinguished position. Yet he has her saying when she had no chair about,
or even professorship for that matter.
Well, I mean, she was associate professor, so she had tenure and everything. But
I thought it was she was still at Oxford.
No. Well, he said once that she was at Oxford, but that and seemed to imply and started to say it another time and corrected himself. Most of the time, he actually does remember where she is. I just happened to encounter him confused about where she was one time, like speaking one time. So
yeah, I mean,
that's
that can happen.
And that can happen. But the whole I have a chair to project when she had no chair makes you wonder. It makes you wonder about all the rest of the things that he says about his conversation with her. If he is assigning to her a statement that would be very silly for her to make. He also states that she was the department head when she was not she was a department head at Oxford. And then she was a department head at Cambridge. And then this other person was a department head at Oxford.
He seems to call everyone
is a department head because he seems to mistake the idea that this is some sort of academic honor. You are usually almost always required to be a full professor to be the department head, and it gives you the power to direct the department certain ways. So it's nice in that way. It is not an honor for your research. It is part of your service. Every professor has to do teaching, research, and service. And research is what gets you your next positions. Teaching doesn't, service doesn't get you a promotion. So you even get warned against, taking on too much. If you have high ambitions, taking on more service-oriented things, because it can derail you from doing the research that can get you promoted. So he says all kinds of interesting things about her. He also specifically ascribes to her 3 different important positions in his narrative. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The first one.
Before you get to that, I did actually want to say more in the introduction. You were very eager to talk, so I let you get on it. But before you get to the heart of the matter, I did want to address, because there will be people, in fact, we already have a 6 dislike. There'll be plenty of people who'll be like, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be criticizing Jay Smith. Why didn't you go to him in private if you had concerns? Blah, 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 blah. We've been over this many times, but it's been a while since we did a show specifically on Jay, although we have done many shows on historical issues, and no one seemed to complain because we didn't specifically say the name Jay Smith in the title. It seems that they're triggered not by the material so much, but by the mere fact of mentioning his name. So first of all, the biblical statement about approaching your brother if he sins against you is about moral sin. It's not about teaching. It's not about a public figure making incorrect statements. Incorrect statements being made publicly should be corrected publicly. Additionally, we have gone to Jay Smith multiple times, and he was not all that interested in what we had to say. In fact, he took my private email, offered to him as some points of concern, and then used that to make a show critical of me, distorting my words, saying that
which he misrepresented you and did not even show the email. He said this, and what he said was not true.
Correct.
So he was like, Thaddeus said X. Thaddeus did not say X. So he's taking a private email and not even doing the decency of showing the words, but instead saying false things about what it said.
Well, I don't know. He might not want to show it because, as a private email. But, I mean, he misrepresented my position.
You can't misrepresent it if you show people what it is. So
that is true. But he may not have wanted to show it because it was private, or he may have thought it wasn't necessary. I don't know. But either way, he did misrepresent my position intentionally or unintentionally. It was misrepresented. When I corrected him on that, he did, to his credit, offer to edit the video. And I said, that's not really the point. The point is that you revealed that you did not take my criticism seriously. You don't take me seriously as a peer. He explicitly said, these people are not my peers.
He called
Saying that we didn't have
a historian. So
yeah,
he
we
called
didn't have
himself a
enough
historian.
knowledge to be able to criticize him. And he's making statements that are factual errors. There are statements that are matters of interpretation and opinion,
Correct.
and that different people could disagree on, but he's also making basic factual errors. And what I was expressing my concern about was basic factual errors that, in addition to being wrong, which is enough of a problem, are also extremely embarrassing and anti-Christian when you actually think about the implications of his statements. In particular, my concerns, although we've addressed many things, my concerns were about him claiming that Muhammad is found in the Bible. But that just means that when Muslims say Muhammad, they're really referring to Jesus, because that's what the Bible means when it says Muhammad. Now, the Bible says no such thing. And all of the research that he, quote unquote, research that he was citing came from Mel. And most of it was AI hallucination nonsense. The rest was idiotic speculation by Mel. And so I addressed him on that concern, and very genuinely. And his response was, well, Thaddeus said that he's only interested in attacking Muhammad Hijab because he wants to get more views. When what I said was, if I was out for views, because people are accusing me of being out for views, I would focus on attacking Muhammad Hijab, but I'm not doing that because I'm not interested in views. I'm interested in the truth. So he totally flipped it on its head, what I actually said. And I don't know, again, he could have done that on purpose, or he could just really not have read it carefully and not understand, because that would be consistent with his entire pattern of how he operates. He takes these things and remembers some of the words said, and then creates a story out of those words that doesn't match the sources he's citing. And thus we come to Patricia Crone.
Exactly. And do keep in mind that the accusation of you're just doing this for views, you're just doing this for money, he gave that to David Wood, said David Wood is only doing this for money, saying that Muhammad exists. David Wood doesn't need Muhammad to exist. I don't need Muhammad to exist. How much money have I ever taken doing this, Thaddeus?
Nothing.
Nothing. Thank you. So,
well, or perhaps negative money, right? Because
you're a
channel member, for
example.
I'm
a channel member. So yes, that's true. Negative money. So how much fame, like I'm using something over my face right now. I don't want fame. This is not my name. I am here in interest of truth. On the other hand, there are people who are, and Thaddeus gives up money to do these, because these streams usually do very poorly in terms of donations. It turns people off. People stop listening to him. So Thaddeus has certainly lost money, although, he's lost his job. So this is now his full-time income, what he's trying to make of it. But this hurts him. It does not help him. Jay Smith, on the other hand, travels the world giving these talks. And he is a full-time missionary supported to travel the world specifically and give these talks. So, since he chooses to level this accusation at others, I would invite anyone who has been poisoned by his shill, you're just a shill, you're just in it for money, the thing that he always spouts at other people, I want you to examine that critically in terms of reality and not just believe it because Jay Smith talks a big game and seems really warm and friendly and so funny. Ha ha ha. We're here about truth. We're here about accuracy. We're here about not humiliating Christians in front of the world. Because if Jay Smith goes over to Africa, tells a bunch of Africans nonsense, and they find out that they have been lied to when they speak to Muslims, what do you think their chances are of being more likely to be converted to Islam? They would think that everything that they've been told is a lie. And this has been propped up by lies. So this is very, very, very dangerous stuff. And it needs to stop. So as far as Jay Smith's talking points about Patricia Crone, other than his narrative. Oh, what was really funny, I found one video. He usually says, "My very good friend, Patricia Crone," or "My Patricia Crone, my good friend," or Corona. For some reason, he adds an extra syllable. But what he says, and one of them is, she died recently. My good friend, my friend, I knew her.
Well, there you go. That's accurate.
So, and that one's accurate. That one's accurate. He will call people that he barely knows my good friend. He seems to have discovered that she died like a year and a half after she died. He was never correct on which year she died in. But if you go to almost all of his current videos, he still acts. So by 2018, he knew that she died. But he thought she died in like 2017.
Didn't she die in 2017?
No, she died in 2015. She died in 2015. He thought she died in 2017, in 2018. And then consistently, about 80 or 90% of the time, he speaks of her in present tense. He'll even speak of her as if she is an active contributor right now from the grave. She has been dead now for 11 years, and it's quite unfortunate because she died fairly young. She was only 70. But that's a significant thing too, to act like someone is one of the people on your team, your current contributor. Quite interesting.
This is very important because he regularly references her as an appeal to authority, which is a logical fallacy, but as far as logical fallacies go, it certainly is one of the most widely used, most legitimate fallacies. So he'll reference her, right? And her 15 languages, which also don't exist, and her, academic status as support for the things he's saying when she isn't alive, and never agreed with the things he is saying for the most part. Obviously, she would agree with some statements he's making, but for the most part, the stuff that he spouts had nothing to do with the claims in her books.
Correct. He most especially likes to appeal to Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam, which he usually calls her book on Meccan Trade. Okay, that's his favorite one to cite because that's the one where he says 3 things happen. Number 1, what was Patricia Crone supposed to be doing? Supposed to have discovered? She did what?
According to my, hearing and memory of Jay, the most important thing she did is she looked at all the maps. That maps written in every language, as if maps are written in. Looked at the maps in every language and was shocked because she couldn't find Mecca on any map before the 9th century, and so she concluded that Mecca never existed. That is
complete nonsense. She never did anything like that. Never, as we will see today. That's total nonsense. He totally made that up. He pulled that out of his rear end because it sounds cool.
Then another thing that I think he says regularly is she proved that Mecca couldn't have been on any trade route.
Correct. She says that. He says that she proved this. Do you know what she says? She says 2 other people have shown this years ago. So apparently Patricia Crone writing about 2 other people who have, pointed out this fact that was spread as a myth by a guy named Lamens. Henri Lamens. I might be French, so I'm totally not pronouncing. I'm going to pronounce the last name as if it were English. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not really sure where he is from, but his first name I think was Henri, if I had seen it, if I remember correctly. But that's total nonsense. She is talking about how other people have pointed out that Lamens' theory was wrong. And here are the 2 people who pointed that out. And she just says this is in passing. She did not prove that it went by and you have to go down and you have to go up and you have to do this and you have to do that. She never did any such thing. She didn't need to. Somebody else had written about it a long time ago. She just pointed it out in 1 sentence, right? Then the third thing is that she went to all the original languages, all the sources to look for Mecca. She never did that. She didn't go to all of these places.
Yeah. So, sorry, just real quick. The impression I get from Jay is that, there's like all these travel logs and all these merchant records, and she went through every
Documents.
record that could possibly mention the city of Mecca or something along those
Yeah.
lines.
And that's the intent. That's what he's trying to, like, the impression that he's trying to leave you with, and it is just utter and complete nonsense. So, we're going to actually look at Meccan Trade and the rise of Islam, and I will try to stop in the areas that are similar to what he was claiming what's going on and discuss them, because, of course, she doesn't actually say the things that he claims. So she was instrumental in shaking loose this idea of Mecca that did not come from the Islamic sources. This is one of the most important things for everybody to realize. She does not say that it's coming from the Islamic sources. Let me go ahead and share that with you. If I can find it.
Oh.
She says she's saying, I think is that it? Which one's being shared? I don't even know which one's being shared right now. Let me reshare. So I'm sure that I'm like sharing, you're going to look at the correct thing. So this time we're mostly going to be looking at
so that is what
actual text. And I know it's not terribly interesting, but I've spent a long time like writing. Oh
yeah, by the way, if you haven't checked it out yet, be sure to check out Mary's website, where she's putting out article versions of these streams.
Yep.
I'll get a link to that added to the video description.
Yep. And I just put in the current one that we're going through. There are two. The other one is not posted yet that I'm really going to kind of dive into the source with. One of them is going through and summarizing and kind of showing how different it is than Jay's. Right now, it's totally unedited because I had a major plumbing emergency and have completely gutted the kitchen and half bath down there, drainage, the waste pipe, and completely redone it this week. So I've been quite busy with that, but it will be edited in a bit. So it's super, super rough right now, but I wanted to go ahead and throw it up here because we were going to go on. Now, in her first published book, she wrote together with a guy named Michael Cook. They were both proteges of a dude named John Wansbrough. John Wansbrough was like, he had super kooky ideas. He was kind of a nut, and wanted to do some of the dumbest types of feels-based biblical stuff, the formalism, which is total nonsense. It's as much nonsense as Freudianism is. It's just not professional in the least. And he was trying to like apply that to Islamic sources. And so he created this massively doubting all historicity and inventing other ideas thing. And so they put his two proteges at the time, they're his grad students, collaborated together and wrote this book called Hagerism that had this totally wacky, completely bonkers thesis that Mecca was way in the north and that they thought that it was a Jewish sect that thought that they were descended from Hagar, and it was nutty. But they did point out some important things they served an important point because the Orientalist groups had just kind of gone along sassy, fat, and happy without much controversy and had never had to defend their positions. And so this forced them to go, this is why this is true. This is why this is not true. This is why we believe these things, rather than just going, well, it's kind of this received idea that we got through other people. It forced people to go back to the sources and look at them and defend the position. It forced them to go back to non-Islamic sources. It forced them to go to epigraphic sources. So it's very, very important.
Yep. So what Mary is saying is basically after the time of Muhammad, the myth of
No,
Mecca in history.
no, I'm not even saying after the time of Muhammad. Nope. I am saying in
Would-
the 19th and 20th century among
yeah.
Orientalists.
If you would have let me finish my statement,
Oh, sorry.
that the myth evolved and grew and grew and grew, and by the time that Orientals or Western people are looking at the history of Islam, they're inheriting this story that has grown and is gigantic, right? This gigantic myth. No, that's not what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the Orientalists pulled it out of their butt and made it up because it sounded cool. One specific.
surely that is not true. Surely,
no.
Muslims
Almost
were
all of
saying
this
the same
traces
stuff.
back to one person called Lamans, and the Orientalists actually influenced the Muslims into embracing this massively rich Meccan whatever. So, because there was a strong motive to romanticize things that are Eastern. I mean, that's why Orientalist kind of became a slur, is because they saw it as other and romantic and fascinating and exotic and this wealth of the East kind of thing in their heads, right? Lamans just made it up out of nothing. There was no tradition about Mecca being a huge trading hub before Lamans came along and made it up.
That's
for some
insane.
reason, yeah, I know, it's crazy. For some reason, Montgomery Watt accepted this. And, you know, he was a fairly decent historian otherwise, but he accepted things about Mecca from Lamans, who was totally unsourced. Lamans just made it up entirely. And because Watt was so well respected, he was the one who promulgated this idea very, very heavily, starting in the middle of the 20th century to everyone. That's why, you know, she starts out talking about how this came about, that this came from Lamans through Montgomery Watt. Then she noticed, and she also kind of blamed Kister a little bit unfairly, but she did note Kister's work is apparently held to corroborate the picture drawn up by Lamans. So what she's kind of really saying here is that people see Kister as corroborating that, but he really doesn't. I mean, he's the one who talks about how they had one-room huts, and their huts didn't have ceilings until Khadijah's lifetime, right? So if you are a very poor reader of Kister, you could claim that it corroborates the picture drawn up by Lamans, but it really does not. And there are places where she notes that it specifically does not. And then a few other people kind of followed in the wake of Watt of the Orientalists. These are all Westerners to see this as this really great, fantastic place. And the big question she wants to answer is, what are they trading in? What are they trading in that could possibly make them this enormous center like Lamans says? She is not talking about the standard Islamic narrative. She's not talking about the Islamic sources. She's talking about the Western Orientalist picture that got adopted from Lamans. Can you guys defend this? And she's going to say that, no, you can't defend that. That's not what the Islamic sources describe. So her methodology is extremely similar to whose, Thaddeus?
Yours, Mary.
Yes! Whose is it not similar to? J. Smith's. It is not similar to J. Smith's. So this is, and it's so ironic because a massive amount of the information here are things that I have been saying for years. I overwhelmingly agree with her first 6 chapters. Her last 2 are a bit garbage, but of the 2, she like 85% corrects one of them in another article because she realized, oh, I had no idea what I was talking about here. Here's the facts. And she corrects herself. And the other one, I think that she just is not as interested in the religious milieu as other people were. I think she, after Hagar is embalmed, maybe she just didn't didn't look into that very much.
Mhm.
In terms of
Yeah,
like it was a successful book, but in terms of her theory being her major thesis being just shredded, she decided not to dip her feet into that again.
Yeah, so a couple important points there. One, so this came out in 1995, I believe you said. Was
no. That was a discussion with Jay Smith. This is 87.
Okay, 1987. Either way,
Right.
it came out a very long time ago, right? In comparison to what Jay describes, which is why I'm bringing this up. The fact it came out in 87 has no relevance to whether it's true or not. But Jay always says, like, this is cutting edge research. that you know, it's on the cusp of becoming widespread, and people are just now figuring this out.
He
always describes
up.
everything that way.
Yes.
And I'm pointing this out for a very specific reason, because this material was considered very interesting, what did draw a lot of academic interest, and then people looked into it, and the academic consensus is like, there's some interesting points here, but by and large, we don't think that this.
Yeah, that was for
correct.
Hagerism, which is 1977,
right?
Or 77. Hagerism it excited a lot of people, and it drew a lot of scorn because the sources absolutely do not support that. So
right. So
this is 10 years later.
I'm drawing a broader point, Mary. I'm
Yes.
drawing a broader point that
he's acting like that's cutting edge.
Like this, and then Patricia herself revises several of her theories. She changes things. And Jay never references any of her own changes of her theories. He
acts like this is Hagerism. Yeah, he acts like this supports Hagerism when it doesn't. She's entirely abandoned her main thesis of Hagerism right here. She's done with it. She has nothing to do with it anymore. She is kind of casting a little bit of doubt on Mecca as a trading hub and how can they be there and support themselves. But again, she corrects herself. In 2008, she will correct herself and issue her own correction. And she's just flailing in those chapters. Her good chapters, which are the first 6, deal with the sources, not just Islamic, but other sources about these about this era or this area during that time, what they were trading, what was going on here. And, she has a few weaknesses, and I'm a big nitpicker, right? But I am...
Well, I mean, you're never going to agree with anyone 100%.
Yeah, right.
But you agree with her a lot more than Jay does in reality, even though Jay is constantly assigning her as like one of the main authorities. And all the other things that he tells you are cutting edge research that just came out. Same pattern, right? They're things that were published a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, have been considered by academia and have been rejected by mainstream academia.
And by the way, he recently was like, Patricia Crone, she didn't continue reading her source. She found this source, which she didn't. It was already a documented source, but she didn't read this thing about it. What are you talking about, Jay? You just made that up. She did not consider people to be so stupid as to think that they would honestly believe that a Christian in Spain should have a super accurate geographical picture of where Mecca was. Mm-hmm. He got the general region correct. But that's all you would expect of a Christian in Spain making his guesses.
So, relevant question here from Generative Principle. Has Jay published anything? So, I was quite surprised just this past week or so, talking with Mary, to realize that Jay did not get his PhD until 2017. I thought that he had a PhD back in the 90s or maybe even the 80s, based on the way that it's always presented. But in fact, he only got his PhD in 2017, which is right about the time I started to learn about Islam, ironically enough. Which, I mean, when he got it is not super relevant. But I was surprised because he acts like he's, this long time academic, whatever, which is not correct.
History and Islam. His PhD has nothing to do with Islam and has nothing.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I was about to say that, Mary.
Go for it.
His PhD thesis, which I'm attempting to get a copy of, but appears to be a biography of a missionary, a Christian missionary to Muslims, which is all fine and good, but it's hardly relevant to what he is talking about. So for him to be acting like, I have a PhD in Islamic studies and I know all this stuff. I mean, first of all, appeal to authority to begin with is not a good idea. And second of all, it's appeal to false authority because that's not actually what his degree, or at least what his PhD thesis is about. So very strange behavior.
He took courses.
Very big on credentials.
Yes, he's very big on credentials, but he took courses in the UK from 1992 until 2001 and failed to get any degree out of it. 9 years, no degree. Then he started back again in like 2008 and finally tried to get a PhD. Apparently might have even moved to the Australia for the purpose of his PhD from the way he wrote about it. And
yeah, it sounds like his advisor might have been moving to Australia, so then he might.
He wasn't enrolled in anything before then, so.
Well, he called him his advisor. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Like his advisor invited him there around 2008, and then again, and like what was that? Another 9 years. He finally finished his dissertation. Well, we call it dissertation in Australia. They call their PhD writing thingy a thesis, which is like flipped from us. So it's very confusing because their master's is dissertation, PhD is thesis, ours is thesis, then dissertation. So terminology aside, he finished his righty thing 9 years or so after he began in Australia.
Which, in theory, he had already been working on, at least the way he tells it. It's strange. I don't know what the real deal here is, but what I do know for sure is that it doesn't seem to have any relevance to what he talks about. So there is
no. It has absolutely no relevance to the history of Islam. He took at least one course under Hotting, who was really an irrelevant bit of a crackpot in the revisionist school. He went to the center of the revisionist school to enroll in classes and took a class from a crackpot, and Hotting really, really impressed him, and he's kind of been impressed by this ever since.
And as far as I know, he hasn't published anything else.
No.
Even including like in a non-academic press, as far as I know, he hasn't published anything. I believe 2.5 years ago or so is when Mary and I first challenged him to a debate, and he said he first agreed to it, and then he later came back. Oh, he said, he was traveling or whatever, and when he got back, he tried to get on the schedule, and then he's like, well, I decided I want to concentrate on getting my book published, and that was apparently 2.5 years ago, and there is no evidence whatsoever that anything's moving forward. He talks about this regularly. I'm not revealing anything.
Yeah.
People who watch him don't know.
He talks about
regularly about getting stuff published.
6 years.
It's time that we start publishing things, get it into academia or whatever. It never happens.
He could write something very easily. He could submit it to a journal. Nothing's stopping him. And yet he has not written a single article as far as I can tell. He has written nothing. I have now written and made open to the public on this topic more than he has.
That is true. So, and I mean, no one is required to do writing or whatever, but he's the one who's claiming that he's going to. And he calls his stuff, he's like, we're putting this out. We're academics. We want to get academic feedback on this, blah, blah, blah. If you don't publish it in a journal, as far as academia is concerned, you haven't done anything.
Yep.
So.
You haven't done anything.
Celtic Cross said, pointed out that Jay Smith is selling a degree course. Now, to be fair, I don't know that he gets any money from that. The university that it's affiliated with might get all the money, but nonetheless, Jay is at least promoting a degree course related to this material, which is kind of kind of disturbing that there are people who are being trained, who probably people who want to be missionaries to Muslims are being trained in this material, receiving a piece of paper and learning a bunch of nonsense in that course, I'm afraid.
So he did finish a dissertation that was accepted in 2017. So he published a dissertation that was accepted in 2017. What that consisted of, it just seems like a very odd topic because he's walking around saying that it's in Islamic studies and it's in apologetics and polemics, specifically to do with Islam. And that is not what the title says. The title says that it's the life and work of one particular person. Fander, Carl Fander, which for some reason he spells as a C in his own work, but now he spells it as a K. And K.
I have seen it. In fairness, I did see it spelled both ways by other people.
But
so
he's German, so why would he spell it the way he does? I'm very confused.
But people spell it both ways, so that part isn't weird. But the fact that is what the dissertation on is strange, given the claims about it. I mean, there's nothing strange about it as an abstract, but given Jay's claims about what he was researching,
what his PhD was in, because if it was
strange
historical missiology, I could see an analysis of his life and work. If that is what it is, could be a PhD thesis or some original research where you had to travel to interesting places and go here and there and assemble stuff for the first time, like go to Germany, track people down, get letter. That would be something that would be for a historical missiology dissertation in the U.S. sense, and that would be appropriate. It just seems very odd as a topic for what he claims to have studied, especially since his interest was in the historicity of Islam before then. Why did he not work on polemics of the historicity of Islam or something like that, right? Very odd.
So Andrew, pointing out that the half a sentence seems to be missing from your screen, Mary.
Well, yeah, sometimes the scam didn't work. So unfortunately, this is what's available online. And then she points out, hang on, let's see who, this is a quote from someone. Let's see who this quote from. So she she also explicitly talked about the sea trade and pointed out how there is no sea trade that's described aside from extremely local contact with Ethiopians and the nearest at the nearest port. And she points out that Mecca lacks traits of a large caravan because of the hostility of its environment and how far it is from its customers. Now, I will accept the first point. Mecca was not a verdant oasis with extensive irrigation and excellent opportunities for watering many camels. But the second one, I reject entirely because she seems ignorant of Qaryat Zal-Khal, which was the major trading city out in the middle of the empty quarter that was the original route that didn't even run by Mecca until later. Like it didn't run by Taif. The first city was a weird little jaunt into the middle of nowhere, but it was out there because it was between Yamama and Yathrib and was a convenient meeting place and was an incredibly rich city that the Minions had founded to be the outpost. Like they're like, hey, look, if you're trading with Yemen, I don't care where you're from, you're coming here. And so people did. But not terribly applicable because it had been abandoned in the 4th century AD, which points to the idea that Mecca isn't significant during this. It probably doesn't even exist until any route goes that way. The route that went through Taif was probably 1st century BC or AD, and that's probably the first time that Mecca really could have had any relevance whatsoever. So don't talk about my mama, Mary. Yeah, I know. I love that word. It's very silly. So Crone then says that to make up for the fact that it's not a hub, or to make up for the fact that it is not specifically on the route, that some people started claiming this crossroads of all Arabia, and or it is on the incense road from Yemen to Syria. She does not debunk this, but points out that Richard Bouillet, so it's probably Richard Bouillet, has disproven both claims and Cam on the wheel. So she points out that he'd already done that. Then she points out that someone else, Walter W. Mueller, pointed out in 1974, and Nigel Groom calculated in Frankincense and Myrrh in 1981 that Mecca was 100 miles from the road that went through Taif, even though it's really 65 miles by the old road. But, the point still stands. So she's crediting all these other people for things that they had done in the 70s, before that, the early 80s. But Jay Smith thinks that one of her major contributions is that she figures this out in 1987. No, she does. She's just talking about other people having figured this out. So it's very, very.
Well, he read her book and he didn't read theirs. So,
but she says in her book who figured it out. It's so confusing. And then she points out, well, what good was shipped? Since it's cheaper to ship wheat from Alexandria to Rome by ship than it was to transport it from 50 miles away into the heart of Rome itself. So what could they, given this reality, what could they possibly be shipping over land? And so she, she says that, well, if they got really rich, they would have to sell something that's light, rare, and valuable. Well, yes, if they got really rich, but if they're not rich, it doesn't have to be light, rare, and valuable. What actually has to exist is arbitrage, a gradient of demand and income, a gradient of supply. So, even to this day, there are places where people pack salt onto camels and sell them miles away. They sell them for less than what an American would pay in a grocery store for the same amount of salt, despite massively greater efficiency of labor and capital in the US. So they get pennies for their hours compared to here. But for them, that scrap of money is enough. That's how economics works. It is not that whatever's just because they're selling for very little doesn't mean that's necessarily not worth it for them because of their local economic conditions. And I will be right back.
Sure thing. Let me take a couple super chats while Mary is away. So Vic Vega became a channel member.
Early, and this is indeed a sign, yet most of them are not believers. Give alone to Allah, give alone to Allah. Ride the wings of Gabriel, give alone to Allah.
Thank you very much for being a channel member there. Welcome aboard. It does say new, so I assume that wasn't just expired and came back. So welcome aboard. And Terminus with a super chat.
And Allah will bless you in a million ways. You find the tree will grow and you will have lots and lots of wealth. This is the example that we gave to the children. And I'm letting you know that when you sow that seed by giving, you shall receive much more than you gave by the will of Allah. Give as much as you can, for indeed you will reap much more than you have sown.
Reaping those rewards. As per Goofy Mink. Terminus says, I just hope that doesn't become another Shamunian roller coaster. So Mary and I have been talking about Jay and his theories for probably like 2 years now.
Yep.
Blew up over the summer. So, 8 months ago, give or take now. And what I've said about Sam has been since then. So this has been going on far longer than anything related to Sam. Although that is a good reminder. I do need to get back to criticizing Sam and all his fraudulent activities as well. So thanks for the donation and the reminder that I need to do some work on that. There's just been so much disaster going on in Dawa lately that I haven't had
that's
time
right.
to
Yeah.
cover the Christian errors.
Nonsense. So she then starts to set up here. She'll go into it more in detail in the next one about the idea of how the spice trade developed according to standard histories at the time. She goes into it way more in this chapter. So in the classical spice trade. So here she is talking about how the spice trade developed, what is being traded where, and what's going on. Now, here's another place where J. Smith just happily slanders his good friend Patricia Crone to say that she is apparently too stupid to have realized that the trade went by sea, whenever she says this in detail here. And he pretends that it's a new discovery that his researchers have made. We figured this out. Even Patricia Crone with her 15 languages couldn't know this. We have this new element. You have to have a port and seaport, and every city has its seaport. And he's kind of dropped that every city in the desert has a seaport nonsense, because it's absolutely insane. Because he tries to make Medina have a seaport, which is just not
What?
working. Yeah, like Medina exists because it has a seaport. He said that several times. But
Isn't it
the trade goes by sea.
100 miles from the sea?
Yeah, I don't even know. He just says random things. Maybe someone criticized him for all of his nonsense about, there are no cities in deserts because there's no water. That's why it's a desert. So no city can have a desert, or no desert can have a city. Cities don't exist in deserts. In the desert, there's no water, and where there's water, there's no plants, and where there's plants, there's no people, there's no animals, and where there's no animals, there's no people. There are Bedouins to this day in the Hijaz who graze their animals. And he will show pictures during the dry season when everything like dries up, a really bad drought, when everything's dried up except for the trees. Well, when that happens, guess what the animals eat? They eat the trees. They eat the bushes. Somebody said the problem with Patricia Crone is that she just isn't a peer of Jay. Apparently so, because Jay just figured this out, even though it's in this book. Like this book that he refers to all the time. But he's just figured this out and needs everyone to know this new breaking information that she wrote about in 1987.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I will say, it may be new to Jay, right? He may not be getting new information to him, but he's always telling this is like cutting edge academic research. When most of, I think that him and Mel broke up, but until recently, most of what he was saying was coming from Mel, and Mel was, yes, he was finding it, sometimes just making it up, but finding it for the first time. But it was still a paper written 10 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever.
Or 40 years ago.
In many cases, 40 years ago. And the reason that no one knew about it is because the paper didn't garner much of any attention, and what little attention it did get was criticism saying this is inaccurate. But it's been suppressed. It's cutting edge research, blah blah blah. No, it's just a bad theory. That's all. Right?
Well,
you can find tons of bad theories in academia. Not this, but not what's on screen. Just to be clear, I'm just saying abstract in general. Things Mel's been bringing up are things that no one else takes seriously.
He quotes random conversation from Usenet groups that happen to be saved online as authoritative. If it has been written down by anyone,
and that would make it the 90s for sure if it's Usenet.
If it's been written down by any human being, he calls it research, no matter what it is. He would use Reddit as an authoritative source. Just some guy on Reddit. Not an academic talking about his research, just some random person. All right, so she also points out, by the way, that guess who was the one who first introduced the idea that the Meccans were dealers in exotic goods? Straight up Lamans. He just made it up. Lamans is no longer cited at all, yet this kind of, his idea and conception of Mecca really influence Orientalists, even though people all know that he was a terrible researcher and he had no sources for anything. But this influenced the Orientalists, and from the Orientalists, it influenced the Muslims, which is pretty funny. So in this section about the classical spice trade, she first defines what spices are as she talks about them. So she means incense, she means medicinal things, she means perfumes, she means food flavors, she means all of that stuff. So when she uses spices, she means all this other stuff too. Now, her sources, she starts out by discounting the idea that there was a really early trade in myrrh and frankincense. So, she does correctly say that Hatshepsut's frankincense clearly came from Africa, not from Oman. But then she points out, Queen of Sheba, so maybe there was trade there, but she's like, well, Queen of Sheba, she could have been from farther north and other various things, but she I don't know why she really wanted to research this. Oh, maybe because it meant, oh, here we go. Ha, that's hilarious. I think I know why he thinks that she reads Akkadian because she mentioned Assyrian records. Therefore, she reads Akkadian. Anyway, she didn't do a terribly great job of this. We found an incense burner in Oman from around 2250 BC, and it's starting to show up in the middle of the Euphrates in the Mitanni Empire as a borrowed object from the 1000s BC. So it shows that this same incense burner, its style, its type, was moved from Oman to the middle of the Euphrates, the Mitanni Empire. What's really interesting about this is that it's kind of weird for it to suddenly show up in the middle of the Euphrates, not toward the mouth. Why is it with the Mitanni? And that would indicate that it actually came up the incense road carried by camels across land up the Western Incense Road, the one that runs north from Yemen to Syria. So it seems to be taking the Yemen to Syria route at that time. And that's before Qadat whatever it's called, the city in the middle of the desert was founded. So at that time, it probably did actually go up along the Hijazi plateau, the plateau right before the Hijaz. So she's trying to push it later into the 700s BC, but by the time it shows up in 600 BC, in the earliest mentioned in Greece, the Minians, remember the Minians, they're probably the people who established the Kaaba, because the first Kaaba was to the god Wad, who was the high Minian god. They already had completely secured that western route. The Minians controlled that route, and they were personally traveling from Yemen up through the Incense Road far enough that even the Greeks know that they were the ones who dealt in frankincense and myrrh, which is pretty interesting. They have quite a bit more of a level of control over an area that was indeed sparsely settled, a few oases. And usually these would tend to be independent, like tiny little city-states, because they're separated by a lot. But the Minians were able to exercise control over this area such that that road was basically theirs. They were able to trade. And by the time they're showing up fully controlling this road, they're taking over something. Before this, there would have, in early times, which is what she really doesn't understand, is that there would have been casual trading as a side hustle for people who were moving their animals around from place to place anyway. So yes, organized caravan trading with big loads of animals going all the way down into Yemen and all the way up to Syria, that would have taken quite a while to develop. But it's very clear that informal trading had been established, bringing frankincense, all the way from Oman into the Mitanni Empire in before the end of the Bronze Age. Not hugely relevant, but it kind of speaks to some of her biases in terms of her skepticism, how it's very misleading. It's like she doesn't see all the steps that would have to happen before you have a certain type of evidence appear. Before you have a completely established trade route with one country projecting its whole power over the whole thing, you're going to have other steps before that. And she just doesn't quite see that. So that kind of shows what the bias can do to you. Now, she did mention correctly that starting as early as the 2nd century BC, some of the kingdoms in Yemen were trying to get around the fact that the Minions controlled the land route and were beginning to load up product onto rafts that the Nabateans had. And these were quite terrible boats. They were horrible sailors, and the amounts were quite small. But and their boats got a little bit better coming into the 1st century BC, to the point where they attempted to like stop the Egyptians, who are like, hey, we can sail down there. Let's sail straight there and bypass these Nabateans, these people in Petra, who were the end of the land route as well. And so they like tried to pirate the ships and just got absolutely decimated. And then the Romans took over Egypt. And by the time the Romans control Egypt, within a very short period of time, trade is established between Yemen and Egypt directly across the sea. Absolutely no need to pay the markup of the land route. They conquer at the end of the 1st century or beginning of the 2nd century AD. They conquer right around that period. They conquer Nabatea. So it's gone. Nabatea is gone before 120 AD. It is now Roman Empire. It's just Rome. And now Rome can sail from both ports. And so it can bring stuff to Egypt. It can bring stuff straight to Syria. Does not need the land route. There were descriptions of how rich the land traders had become, and the 3rd century BC. All of this is gone now. Complete collapse of this old rich trade, gone. There is no transit trade of spices at this time. Patricia Crone gets most of this history right, a little bit fuzzy on particular details about when things happen, but she does get most of the thrust of it right, that by even the 3rd century AD, there is no land trade from Yemen to Syria of frankincense or myrrh or any of those or any kind of incense of that sort. She
that's because there was no people there, because there was no water there.
Yeah, there's no water there because it's a desert. Don't you know? There's no water in a desert, so there's no people there. And it's so funny because he's like, he'll say, "Oh, Medina was a city. Medina's in a desert too. It has no water either." So just to clarify for everyone, the reason why Mecca was barren was not because they had no access to water. They had wadis coming down from the plateau, bringing huge amounts of water by them. Today, you can look on maps of the Hijaz where water's coming off the plateau, and you can see where people make irrigation ditches to capture the water to water groves of trees. They have date palms without any water from the sea, because Jay Smith wants to make this big point about right now Mecca is getting a lot of the water from a desalination plant. Yeah, because it has hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, because they got to support 1 million people or whatever.
Right, which is totally different than supporting 500 at that time. The reason why it has no plants is because it is a haram area. It is a sacred area where it is not allowed to cut things down. It is not allowed to dig ditches. It is not allowed to plow. It is not allowed to cause the destruction that planting things cause. It is a sacred area. It's not because you can, as soon as it became an Islamic time, you have people immediately, because they're rejecting all of their old traditions, and you have people immediately digging ditches and irrigating things and planting gardens, because no longer do we have this, you can't grow stuff here. Muhammad actually reinforced some of the haram standards, but as soon as people got around Christians and Jews, are like, oh, that's a pagan thing. But Muhammad himself reinforced this. He said, you can't cut down any trees, you can't cut down any bushes. The only thing that you can, you can let your animals graze, and you can cut a certain type of grass that was used for the forges of the blacksmiths, because you really need that. To burn for food, they use dried dung. So just so that everybody's clear, that's why they didn't have to cut wood or even need wood, because they're using the dried dung that's kind of concentrated plant matter left over from the animals. So
a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Medina was a bigger city than Mecca around Muhammad's time.
Oh, much bigger,
right?
Much bigger.
Yeah. So
it was like 3,000
Medina
people.
or Yathrib was a fairly major city, right? Fairly significant.
Yeah, it was.
Everything's relative. Obviously, they didn't have cities of 10 million or anything, but
right.
It is a fairly large area, whereas Mecca is a tiny little backwater village. So there's a pretty substantial difference between them, but Mecca definitely exists.
Yeah. But that's why they call it the big city. I mean, they call it the city of the prophet. It's the city. What do you call the city if you're in backwoods nowhere? You call that the nearest larger town.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, it was the city of the prophet, but they just would call it the city because for them it was, because Mecca was so small. And there have been studies done by recent scholars about how small it was. So she points out as well that as soon as you get this trade, absolutely nothing in terms of from India comes to Syria on camel, because it's so much cheaper to take it by water. And anyway, you don't want to pay the intermediate person. The Romans very quickly established their own little enclaves at the important ports. They went beyond Yemen. They didn't even want to pay for the delivery from Oman to Yemen of frankincense. They developed their own. They started sailing out to the ports of Oman for frankincense. So they'd sail down, they'd pick up frankincense from Oman, they'd pick up myrrh from Yemen, and they had their little enclave in Yemen, so that whenever the Indian traders got there, their local representatives would buy directly from the traders and then immediately load it onto Roman ships when they showed up. So yes, the Meccans were the hillbillies of Arabia. They were in the poorest area. They were in the mountains. They were backwoods guys. They talked about the big city. They were super scared of the super powerful people. They thought that the powerful people cared about them, but the powerful people didn't even know they existed at the time. That's why you have the story of the elephant. Muhammad made up the story where, the elephant was totally trying to come to Mecca. The elephant was not trying to come to Mecca. Abraha was interested in the Kinda kingdom that had controlled that entire area had basically fallen apart, and there were different tribes fighting over its corpse. And Abraha was interested in forcing those who were not allied with him, forcing them back into being allies with him again. And so he was marching north to fight them, which he did, and then he marched home. The Meccans were scared that he was coming for them, but he wasn't. Why? Because he might not have even known they existed, because they were that unimportant to this other kingdom. He did not care about them. They had no impact even on regional politics at this time.
I think this is probably a joke, but from Kenneth says, wait, why are you telling on your own people for lying? This will give the Christian phobic people fuel. LOL. Yes. That's what us Christians do. We give our opponents fuel by standing for truth, no matter the cost. I mean, in fairness, there will be people who will use this kind of thing and say, see, the Christians are always fighting. You should be like us Muslims who totally don't fight at all. We never have disagreements between, I don't know, say Sunni and Shia, or this sect of
the
Sunnism
Dawa
and this sect of
boys
Sunnism,
constantly.
or this Dawa guy and that Dawa guy, who both are in theory the exact same sect, right? We never have any disagreements.
Their disagreements are not over lying. Lying's no problem. It's not over scamming. They scam enormous amounts of money from their donors. It's not over immoral behavior. They're massively immoral and they don't care. Though that is not where the source of any of the drama is in the Islamic community. It's not any type of misdeed. It's not any type of, much less they're like, behind veils is trying to bring attention to academic misconduct, and Muslims just don't care. Just don't care. So, we have very different values than Muslims do. So we care when people stand up and say things that aren't true, even though it isn't about our faith. It's about something else. But as a representative of Christianity, standing up, apologist, teaching you about Islam to teach false things and then speak false things is massively, massively problematic. So,
sorry, Celtic Cross. Can't get the image of Muhammad playing the banjo.
He's
out of my head.
They're more like biker gangs who also do rap battles, because there are all these rap battles in the Islamic sources. So they are gangs. They're hillbilly biker rap battling bandits, basically. So
I don't know if you made that better, but
made it weirder. But that's really what they are. Like, it's clear they have rap battles all the time. That's like their major source of insulting one another is through song. That's why Muhammad's like, stop playing those instruments. People can always say mean things about me when they play instruments and sing. So you need to stop singing because you're mean when you sing. That's literally it. So there was also less and less emphasis on even going to Oman over time, where they got more and more of their frankincense typically from Ethiopia as well. So, one point that she made that was really interesting that I hadn't heard before is that there was a Talmudic rabbi of the 3rd century who was kind of confused by the description of Arabs carrying aromatics overland in the Bible, because he was used to them trading in hides and naphtha, which is basically any kind of pitch. And another says camel hides and evil smelling pine tar. So apparently they don't like their version of balsam. That may be that pitch may actually be from a particular tree that produces a lot of tannins, maybe. So it might be that particular tree that they traded in, and other things they traded in parts of it. I thought the pods, maybe the sap does the same thing, to tan leather with. Now, Crona is wrong that incense stopped being of economic importance. It was merely less important, and the international trade was wholly sea-based at this time. She also points out that by, the 2nd century AD, certainly by the 3rd century AD, sources stopped talking about Yemen being wealthy. So Yemen was fantastically wealthy in early Greek sources. You push out whenever you're bypassing Yemen for a lot of this stuff, because you now have a competitor. There are 2 sources of myrrh, there are 2 sources of frankincense. You can go to the cheaper one, you can trade, but they better match the price. They no longer have any control over stuff that comes from India. So they're no longer described as fabulously rich by the Greeks. Greeks just think that they're an average sort of people in their descriptions. Now, the Meccans think they're fabulously rich, but the Meccans think everybody's fabulously rich because the Meccans are super, super poor. So, and Crona herself is kind of confused by the attribution of things like wealth to various people in Mecca. Yeah, sweetie, it's Meccan rich. They have 2 whole rooms in their mud hut. They're so rich. They're Meccan rich. She doesn't quite, and yeah, all the camel numbers and stuff are wildly inflated because people of other areas, the Hijaz is the poorest area of all places that support Bedouins. It is the poorest area. And so these are people from the poorest area. They're among the poorest of the Arabs. They're poor. So whenever there's a term like the richest one in town, well, yeah, that's like, wow, she's gorgeous. She's only missing 3 teeth, right? In comparison to the rest of the selection that you have. And it's like the terms honorable and wise and distinguished. They're just fluff terms. They're fluff terms. You want to say nice things about people, especially in these Eastern cultures. You use fluffery. It's just what you do. Everybody talks like a Trump. You know, he has the greatest this and the nicest this and the best conversations and the fabulous this. It's just puffery. So she then summarizes the landscape up until the period of the Sasanian conquest of Yemen. She does this with good insight. A lot of it's extraneous to the purpose, but again, like I said, by the 2nd century AD, Yemen is no longer being described as a place of wealth. And by the way, she got completely confused by the fact the Byzantines start calling Yemen India, just like I originally did. I was like, why are they talking about India? This isn't India. This is Yemen. Yeah, the Byzantines in the 6th century suddenly start calling Yemen. Before they called it Arabia Felix, but then I guess with the switch to Greek. But no, they did have Arabia Eudaimon, which was the same thing in Greek. Anyway, they start calling it India and call it India for a while. Patricia Crone got confused by this as much as I did. So that made me happy that other people were like, why are you doing this, you weirdos? So J. Smith calls his heavily butchered version of the sea trade narrative as his own discovery, or that of one of his collaborators. A brand new discovery that Patricia Crone, for all of her 15 languages, she overlooked. So he credits to Crone observations that she did not make and pretends to have discovered things that Crone may have potentially been the first one for any to lay out for any Islamic studies audience. So it's quite odd that he does that. Because I don't know whether or not because she isn't citing other people in the Islamic studies space, in the Orientalist space, when she lays this out. She's writing this as if she's the first one who really is laying this out for this audience. So quite peculiar. Then in the third, so this excellent chapter, I have a few nitpicks about some of her approaches and her, until we have this data, we should not, a few nitpicks, but fine. She also clearly says that there was no transit trade, meaning that, and by the way, there is not a single Islamic source that portrays a transit trade ever. The end point or the end point and starting point of every single trading expedition is Mecca. They go out to a place, they come back to Mecca. They go out to another place, they come back to Mecca. Even the ones that are almost certainly just legendary and made up and pulled out of people's rear ends, they're going to a place and coming back to Mecca. They are not trading the incense route. It's never in the sources. And she points this out.
So I'm gonna pause you for a second. So that's very important, actually. So what Mecca is doing in the Islamic sources is they're taking their goods and going somewhere to trade them with someone else. They're not taking goods are not coming in and then the Meccan traders pick them up and take them to the next city or whatever. That is not what is happening in the Islamic sources. So it is it is clear that Mecca is not on like some international trade route.
Right. Because they're not doing any transit trade. They're not, the endpoint is always Mecca. And yet, listen to Jay Smith talk about it. What does he think the Islamic sources say? That they were trading from Yemen up to Syria. That's not what no Islamic source talks about any trading trip. any trading trip with endpoints that are other than
Yeah,
Mecca,
and
ever.
I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I've never even heard any Muslims making that claim. I
No.
mostly heard it from Jay and maybe a few other Christians talking about the grand trade of Mecca or something. Now, I mean, I have heard Muslims who think that Mecca was a large city or something like that, but I've never heard anyone claiming anything about trade. That seems to be a claim only being made by Christians, unfortunately.
All right, so Patricia Crone next talks about the Meccan spice trade. And in this, she goes to other sources outside of the Islamic sources for the most part. What is being what could have been traded according to the other sources.
You see, this is the 15
here.
languages.
And she notes, so what she says. Oh, by the way, Jay Smith declares that she has written a chapter on every single spice. It's a subsection. It's a subsection within Arabian spices. There is this subsection on frankincense that is 1.5 pages long in terms of, once you take out all the footnotes, it's 1.5 pages long. A subsection on myrrh that is 1 paragraph long. A subsection on concommentorum, which is like not even a page long. So, but to Jay Smith, he wants us to all know she has written a chapter on each one of these.
Wait. She wrote a chapter on on say myrrh, for example.
Yes, that's what he claims. Again, can we trust Jay on anything he says? Is this a chapter on frankincense?
I mean, not in the
Let's see how many paragraphs it is. 1, 2. It's 2 paragraphs. We have 2 paragraphs on frankincense. We have 1 paragraph on myrrh that's less than half a page.
Well, maybe he's using like the ancient definition, right? Yeah. So like when you read the church fathers, they'll be like chapter 1, but it's really just like 2 paragraphs or whatever.
Those chapters are put in later by other people, though.
I know.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't have said ancient. I should have said like the classical or something like that. But so that is a way that the word chapter is used. But I mean, it obviously gives the impression, and he is intentionally giving the impression that you wrote a huge amount of material on this. It's exhaustive of everything known or something. A
whole chapter on each one, he says. Anyway, what she concludes, that there are 6 spices. 6 of the spices in question that are this is about locally produced spices that you could find in the environs of Mecca. She said that 6 of the spices have gone out of fashion or had come to be supplied within the Greco-Roman world. And this is local to the Arabian Peninsula. So I would take that date to be after the Sasanian conquest in 525. Before that, not so much. Before that, they were still trading heavily with Yemen. It's just since they could trade with Ethiopia, since they could trade with Somalia, they would much rather give money to Somalia than their enemies, the Sasanians. So that's really when it fell off. It didn't fall off before then. She was a little bit confused about that. But these are frankincense, myrrh, cancacum, tarum, laudanum, and sweet rush. Either people didn't care about them anymore, or they got them from places other than Arabia by the time of by the mid 550s, let's say. Cinnamon and cassia were not the modern synonym, or excuse me, cinnamon. My goodness, cinnamon and cassia. They were different plants back then. And calamus came from East Africa only at this time. So as well. So these were just not, and then the rest were either not traded internationally because you had never been in the trade from Arabia, like balm from balsam, the balm of Gilead, right? That is also present in Mecca, and there's no reason to trade it because it's huge amounts are available in Syria. So why would Syrians buy it from elsewhere? They have as much as they would want there, so no problem. She said that one of the list is very difficult to identify. Two can't even be identified at all. Senna was also not traded because it was available widely in other places as well. Now, she notes that not one of the things listed above of these things that these potential spices by her broad definition of spice that she gave herself, not one of them associated with Meccan trade in the sources. So, according to Jay Smith, if you listen to him, what do the Islamic sources, the standard Islamic narrative, what do they say about what the Meccans were trading? They were trading spices. The Islamic sources never say that. They never say that. And she points out the Islamic sources never say that. So his number one source, the woman who knows 15 languages, is saying something opposite of what Jay is saying about the Islamic sources. Jay is being untruthful about the Islamic sources because it sounds better if the Islamic sources, not some dude named Lamans from Western Europe, made up the idea that they were trading in spices. There is no Islamic source that says that they were trading in spices. Then in the second section here, after talking about...
Pause
Go
for 1
ahead.
second. I will say, as well as not saying they're trading in spices, I mean, when I look at the sources, I never get the impression that the sources think that trade is something super important for the city or whatever. Now, it might have been.
Well, I mean, in food level, it was in the sources, it's very important to get food, but not that you get massive wealth from it. You get absolutely no sense.
Yeah. So what I should have said, I mean, obviously everyone needs to trade. What I should have said is I don't get the impression that it's like part of the cultural identity or something like that, that we are traders, which is kind of funny since Muhammad was a trader himself, that he doesn't like ascribe that as the identity of his city.
Well, I mean, he ascribes himself as being primarily a shepherd. That's what he describes himself as being, because guess what? They only went like a few weeks out of the year for their one. If their trading venture doesn't get stopped, if they're able to do the trading they want to do, they only go to Syria once. There's only one caravan that goes. That's it. If they feel secure. If they don't feel secure, they'll break it up into smaller pieces and send multiple groups. But if they feel secure, they'll just send one group. They'll go up, they'll trade, they'll come home. That's it. Once per year. And that's like 2.5 months of the year to the north and maybe a month to the south. So note, yeah, I definitely wish that Muhammad never existed. However, he did. He did, and he existed as a madman in the desert. And because Jay Smith is so dedicated to this no-mo nonsense, he cannot be forthright about what he used to be able to be honest about things. He used to be able to say that the Quran teaches that Mary is in the Trinity. He used to say this. He doesn't say this anymore. Why? Because it would be stupid for the Quran to say that now. So he doesn't talk about it anymore. Because when his idea, the Quran was made up by some really smart people who were like getting together and creating this new religion to unify their people. So
well, not only that, they were borrowing Christian sources, right? So
they would know about Christianity.
Possibly said that.
So they couldn't have possibly said that. If they were a Christian sect, they couldn't have possibly said that. So Jay used to know things that are true and are super important to press with Muslims. Why does your stupid book think that the Trinity consists of Allah who had sex with Mary and made a baby, and the proof that this isn't true is that the baby was actually born to a virgin, and they're both human. Like, how can you turn your back on that and bury that for the your prophet didn't exist, but really they were Christian?
And I kind of get the emotional appeal, right? It's the same reason that Jesus mythism is popular with atheists. There's just something, very appealing about saying, ha, your religion's so stupid, your guy didn't even exist, right? But as Christians, we need to focus on reality and truth and not just what sounds good. And the reality is that Muhammad certainly existed, right? There certainly is not some conspiracy 100 years or 200 years later or whatever Jay is saying on this particular day, because he changes when the conspiracy took place from time to time. But he always says there's a conspiracy, right? There's always some sort of conspiracy to create this religion out of nothing. And that's just ridiculously implausible on the face of it, even without any evidence, and doesn't fit any of the evidence either. It's as stupid as Jesus mythism to say that Muhammad didn't exist.
And keep in mind, let's see what Patricia Crone says about Islam. She says, there is no doubt Muhammad existed. Occasional attempts to withstand it or to deny it notwithstanding. Is there a doubt that Muhammad existed? No.
Not according to Jay's most important teacher.
Right, his most important teacher. True, documented. Muhammad only appears on this early documentary evidence in the language. He only appears in the 680s, some 50 years after his death. So that's in Arabic, and that's according to her dates at that time. This is the ground on which some have questioned his existence, but few would accept the implied premise that history has to be reconstructed on the sole basis of documentary evidence, i.e. information which has not been handed down from one generation to the next, but rather has been inscribed on stone or metal or dug up from the ground and is thus preserved in its original form. The evidence that a prophet was active among the Arabs in the early decades of the 7th century on the eve of the Arab conquest of the Middle East must be said to be exceptionally good. How good? Exceptionally good. This is someone who is a major, Khomeini's dead? Fantastic. I texted to somebody else that Khomeini's already dead, even if he doesn't know it. So...
breaking news in the last 10 minutes, looks like. I just did a search. Apparently his body, it's breaking news, so there's always a possibility of misreporting, but apparently his body was found after a recent airstrike. So
very good.
He appears to be dead.
So most of the time regime changes in Islamic nations are completely pointless. There are enough people in Iran who are not Muslim that they have a good fighting chance of not having an absolute latrine of a country, because it's not as Muslim as they pretend that it is. So, hey, Iranians, it's up to you now, pretty much. You got to fight for it. You got to fight for it. You can't. You have to destroy Islam. It's your turn. Destroy it. All right. So, listen to this. Most importantly, we can be reasonably sure that the Quran is a collection of utterances that he made in the belief they had been revealed to him by God. Muhammad is the source of the Quran. The book may not preserve all the messages he claims to have received, and he is not responsible for the arrangement in which we have them. What have I been saying, guys? For years. Have I not been saying exactly this? Who agrees with me? Patricia Crone agrees with me. Does she agree with Jay? She does not agree with Jay. Bring back Persia, indeed. Bring back Persia.
I'm going to pause you for 1 second here. Y'all hating on Jay Smith get a life.
Nope.
First of all, this, if you'd actually been watching this stream, you'd see it's not exactly hating on Jay Smith. It's mostly about Patricia Crone and what she's right about. But the lack of life or not has nothing to do with anything. If Jay is telling lies, if Jay is saying false things, let's forget telling lies, right? Lying requires intent, although I think that there might be intent there. Let's just say that he's mistakenly saying false things. It needs to be called out, right? Truth matters. You don't just allow something to take place because, I don't want to be a loser and call him out. I need to get a life. Do you have the same opinion? And I know you don't, but think about it. If I'm hating on, say, Muhammad Hijab, then I need to get a life, right? If I'm hating on Muhammad the Prophet, I need to get a life, right? What is this logic that you can't say something is false without being a loser who's hating on people and you need to get a life?
What I am emphasizing is that he leans on Patricia Crone and what she says to claim that she is in support of his theses. Like his ideas about Mecca, his ideas about Islam, the ideas about this, no. Look at the Quran. Most importantly, we can be reasonably sure that the Quran is a collection of utterances he made in the belief that they had been revealed to him by God. Who does it come from? According to Patricia Crone, her source, from Muhammad. The book may not preserve all the messages. He is not responsible for the arrangement. They were collected after his death. How long after is controversial? It's not really that controversial anymore if you have 1 ounce of academic integrity. It's the people who need it to be controversial pretend that it is, but it's really not. But that he uttered all or most of them is difficult to doubt. Those who deny the existence of Arabian prophet dispute it, of course, but it causes too many problems with later evidence, and indeed with the Quran itself, for the attempt to be persuasive. This is your buddy, Patricia Crone, who began basically doubting everything. She thought that there was a prophet named Muhammad, right? But she doubted everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And spent years trying to poke holes in it and then trying to answer the questions that she rose. And she wrote, and she did, in fact, answer most of her questions. So, 2008, she's writing this, 2008, while she was still a professor emeritus, or she wasn't even emeritus then, she wasn't retired yet, did she retire in 2000? I forget when she retired. But anyway, very significant figure. And Jay Smith's big source, guess who? Like, I could have written those paragraphs. So the returning to our actual thesis, as she's working through this, she goes next to the Indian spices. She says, hey, in conjunction with Arabia, very few spices are mentioned, really, because some were misidentified. She does really good work here. I don't know how much of this is, a lot of this is probably not her original research. What she's doing is she is not going to the original sources. She is synthesizing research that other people, for other purposes, did this research and made it in a form that was accessible to her. And she is synthesizing it for the Islamic studies audience, which is super important. It's really important to take the research. Like I took research about finding that incense burner and 2250 BC, dated to then, in Oman. And I have now introduced this to an audience that is interested in Islam for the first time. So, that there is huge value in that, but she is not looking at the original languages and looking at the original sources. when she says that there is, whenever she talks about the sources in general, she's talking about the Islamic sources. Here, she's talking about other work other people have done to uncover other sources. So now she's repeating what she did before for Indian spices. It's already been established that none of these were carried as transshipments overland, but some of them are used locally in the Islamic sources by people in that area. Ginger had come to be grown in Arabia by this point to a limited extent. It seems to have been shipped fresh via sea to the Byzantine world, whereas ginger from Arabia arrived as a dry powder. Aloe wood was extensively used locally in Arabia and is mentioned in Islamic sources, but Crona notes that the Quraysh are only mentioned as using it, never selling it to anyone or trading it. So they were buying this from Yemen. Then in the third section, she deals with some East African goods, and she noticed how much of a lack there is of anything that is stereotypically or specially East African. They also used pepper as well, by the way. So here are some where is the East African goods? Nope. Where are we going here? Oh, the title didn't scan. So this is East Africa. So ivory, there's some like ivory jewelry that's mentioned. And she points out here's Lamans making up stuff. He says that they went north bearing spices, ivory, and gold. That's just all made up. They weren't bearing ivory. They had some gold and jewelry and stuff, but not even that much. East Africa supplied gold, but Pliny and Cosmas agreed that it was they supplied it to the Ethiopians, who then traded it on. Lamans is the only authority for the view that the Ethiopians passed it on to the Meccans. So is this the standard Islamic narrative, or is it the standard Orientalist narrative? These are mistakes made by Western scholars, unique to Western scholars. And again, slaves, yes, they had many slaves from Ethiopia, but there's a very high chance the vast majority of them came to be enslaved after the Sasanians overthrew the Ethiopians and enslaved them all. So it's them and their kids locally who were enslaved and then sold on. Then she notes other luxury goods. She notes that, guess what? The Meccans were consumers of silk. They never traded it. So they would go to Yemen to get silk from Yemen. Persian woven silks, farther east woven silks, they would get it from Yemen, and they talked about how prized it was. And before you go, they've got silk, so they're rich. No. You have to understand what this culture was. They will live in mud huts and put their wives in a silk dress with a gold necklace because they were very show culture on the body. This was important to their culture. So as much as money as they had, they put on their bodies in the same way that the Bedouins did. They were Bedouins who moved up from bad tents to bad houses. So she makes fun of the Orientalist claims that they're silk dealers by pointing out that there's no such tradition in Islamic sources. She writes, what the sources do assert is that there is a trade in silk between Yemen and Ukaz, or excuse me, it's not Ukaz, it's Ukaz, the market near Taif, apparently independent of Mecca. Yes. Except for that bit about independent of Mecca, because guess who controlled Mecca? The Tamim tribe, together with the Quraysh. Yes, the Quraysh never had full control of a lot of the markets. They didn't have full control of a lot of the religious sites, except for the Kaaba itself properly. But they shared authority of areas and the benefits of that authority with certain other tribes as part of their relationship. They got negotiated kind of special privileges, and the Meccans had their little shovel and everything, taking their little bite out of it. She states here that Meccans didn't trade in perfumes because they didn't trade in perfume ingredients from the external sources, but now she's going to go heavily specifically to analyzing the the sources within the Islamic narrative. Here, what did the Meccans export according to the Islamic sources, where she will draw a different conclusion. So she's saying, in as much as they did not trade in the raw ingredients, there's no conclusion that one would make that they were trading in perfume. But then she's going to analyze the Islamic sources here. So this is the second section, Arabia Without Spices. The first chapter of it is what did the Meccans actually export?
Let me pause you for
ahead.
a second, since it's a breaking point, and take a couple super chats. So Vic Vega with the super chat.
We're asking you to give a loan to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and believe me, that will be paid back in ways you can never imagine.
Who is it that would loan Allah a goodly loan so he may multiply it for him many times over?
Allahu Akbar. I love that verse. Every time we donate to projects, we're giving a loan to our Creator, the most generous, who will return it to us in this life.
Brothers and sisters, can you afford to miss out on this opportunity?
So as a small compensation for your loss, keep it up. Love your channel. God bless you both. I'm not sure what loss refers to. Possibly when you said that, these streams get less views, we're talking about how I'm unemployed or whatever. I'm not sure if that's what it's on, but either way, appreciate that. Thank you for your support. And Retrause Raptor became a channel member.
Wasting your time on social media is one of the best deeds a Muslim can do. There's a huge need for it. You know this and I know this. So that makes the reward even greater. So give generously and Allah Azza wa Jal will give you even more.
Thank you very much for becoming a channel member. Arlette says the cats are so gorgeous. We got the double cat cam going today. Snoopy says scam. No, it's not a scam. You really get money from Allah when you donate. It's totally real, everyone. Yes, the Creator needs a loan. Indeed he does. All right, continuing on with the next section of the book. Or perhaps Mary stepped away for a second. All right, let's go ahead and take it. Oh, there, she's back. All right.
Sorry, I was getting more tea, and I have to go far away because my water's off to get. I got a dispenser for now with the kitchen remodel, so that we can continuously have a supply of water even when the main water's turned off. And
And as Robert points out here, Hijab really needs that money now. Frog One, Dog One says the same. He's bankrupt. He's bankrupt, guys. He was donating all his money to Allah, by which I mean the spectator, but and Allah wasn't repaying him.
That Norwegian mosque, he's trying to run that scam even more to try to get more money for himself. In context, it's crazy because he's asking for money for the Norwegian mosque, but like in the same breath, almost he's talking about how he doesn't have any money, as if he's almost confessing right there.
Yeah, I mean that's very strange, right? Hijab declares bankruptcy. Norwegian mosque project most affected.
Yep. Interesting stuff. All right. So she then starts with the mention of silver being involved in their trade in some way. I think here she kind of gets off track and a little bit confused. With one thing, she's right. It appears that they were carrying, large quantities of silver. The numbers are going to get exaggerated to be large to people who aren't poor later on, because that's just how this oral stuff works. Because if the number's embarrassing, you fix the number. So they weren't able. They didn't dare to take the path to straight up through Medina to Syria. So they decided to take the very much long way out by way of basically Persia, the Persian, the Lakhmids out in the east, the clients of the Sasanians, and then they're going to go out to Lakhmid controlled areas and trade their way up to Syria that way. But Muhammad found out that was where they were going to go because he had spies in Mecca. And then he sent out a force after them and managed to capture them. And with them was a good chunk of silver. Well, they were at a place that mined and refined silver way out there in the lands near Persia. And that's the only time we have any mention of silver being a trading commodity. So what is being implied here in the source is that it said many times that the Quraysh, they would trade wherever they went. As they moved north, they would trade as they went and try to get more, like they would sell camels on behalf of the people that they passed by and then give them back their cut on the way back and take a percentage of it, right? So they
they are effectively renting the camels. Is that what you're saying? They're buying the camels and then they're selling them back?
Well, it does say that they're selling them on behalf of other people. So no, they're taking camels from people in the Hijaz and selling them in Syria.
Okay, so they're trading in camels then.
Yeah, they're trading in camels not from the Meccans. These are not the Meccans' camels. These are other people who have excess camels that they want to trade away, and that they'll take them up to Syria where they get a better price and trade for them there. There's no.
So there is transient trade.
It's not, because they start in Mecca. It's not transshipment.
I know, but they're it's just not Meccan transit. It's Meccan transit from wherever they're picking up the camel.
Well, what they mean by transshipment is like from one to another.
Sorry, Mary. Sorry, that was just a stupid joke. It was just a stupid joke.
Well, if you do that, then the leather counts too, because it was produced in Mecca. But anyway.
So okay. So I still need clarification. So they picked up camels somewhere and then they sold them in Syria. But then you said something else about.
Well, it says that they were selling them kind of on the behalf of the people. So I don't know whether or not they pay them when they come back, or they actually bought them on the way there.
Okay. So
I don't know. I don't know where the arbitrage happens from the phrasing. It kind of sounds like they're not paying them until after they sell them, but that might not be true. That might just be the way it was written.
All right, so
I came up with the wrong.
Yeah, so there's ambiguity. Either they paid them for the camels and then they went and sold them, or they picked up the camels, went and sold them, and then dropped the money off on the way back.
Correct. But they were known for trading as they went. They would pick up things that could be traded in Syria as they went for a profit. So if they saw something, they would pick it up. So they were in this area that produces a lot of silver. So they don't go to their normal places. They don't have the normal people to trade with. They have some extra money with them. So they invest that in the silver and are trying to get to Syria with them when they get raided. So this is the only raid in which silver is taken, and it's taken when they were right around a silver mine, basically. So it made sense in context. With some of these raids, there's a lot of confusion and not many details because Muhammad was constantly trying to raid people. And so it would be hard for people to remember years later what their dad told them about all their raids and all their battles and things. But even so, this makes sense in its context. This is the only time that silver as a commodity is ever mentioned. And she gets kind of confused because silver is then mentioned as being taken in other raids, but it's silver money. Well, yes, they have money with them. Like, okay, yes, they got money. And in fact, if they're coming from Syria, they should mostly have money because Syria was the only real destination for their local products. They were not selling We'll get to that in a second. But they were not selling their leather or their roughly woven things down in Yemen. Yemen is absolutely teeming with Bedouins for the percentage of settled people there are. There's no advantage to selling it down there. They're selling it up in Syria where they get the best price, where the settled population is much, much higher than the Bedouin population by percentage in terms of interaction. So they go north with goods and not much money, and they come back with some goods like food and so on, and a good deal of money, because when they go to Yemen, they take pretty much only money and come back with the goods. So it's a lopsided trade. So she gets a little bit thrown off by the fact that they're carrying money, because I guess she thinks that they ought to have. She
like
realizes that they're not trading
food, or I mean,
yeah, I mean, they
isn't
are
that
trading
normal that you take goods and you sell them and you come back with money? I don't understand why that would be weird.
Well, she knows that they're coming back with stuff too, but she gets confused by the fact that they sometimes seem to have money and sometimes, so anyway, she gets confused. But it is a lopsided trade, so they're going to be coming back with more money than goods on the way back. And more goods, they'll still have money on the way there, because remember, they want to use their money to buy whatever local products as they go north to get more and more products to sell. So they need money going north to get even more products, especially leather, especially woolens, because their clothing that they sold to the north, they did not produce in Mecca. Those were bought, according to the sources, from other people. So they would pass through and take their coarsely woven cloth with them in exchange for money. So they needed money both directions. And she seems confused by the fact that they leave with money and they come back with money. Well, yes, because they're buying stuff.
I mean,
on the way
of course. I mean, you got to buy gas on the way. And no.
Yeah,
but this makes sense, right? Mecca is a very small village. They couldn't possibly produce enough goods to like fill up a caravan, right? So the caravan leaves half full or whatever with local goods, and then it buys more goods on its way to the destination,
right,
and then sells all the goods there, and then comes back with money and maybe some other stuff that they wanted, some stuff they bought there.
Food, wine, oil, very heavily. So it's grain, wine, oil heavily from there. But they're also going to purchase other goods from the oases as they go back south. They're going to purchase their dates as they're coming back south. So they're going to have a lot of money to purchase the dates that they want to have, because they like grain, but they also like dates. They also like figs. They're going to buy their raisins on their way south. So they went
they went from the little tiny town that didn't have any grocery stores, and they went up to the grocery store, and then they came back with food. I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So she discounts any talks about gold other than extremely small amounts, and what is taken from who the Medinans had goldsmiths and so on. The Jews were goldsmiths, because what do Bedouins like to buy? They like to buy gold, but they were not traders in gold. And he also
I'm going to pause you for 1 second, because this is a good reminder that we need to say the topic periodically from Apologetic Jaws. I can't figure out what the topic is. Got here late. Why do we care what Meccans are selling leather? So the topic is, broadly speaking, what was true about Mecca in the 7th century. And we care because if they're selling leather or, anything else, then they clearly exist, right? There clearly is a city there, which already counteracts Jay. And what we're doing is we're discussing what Patricia Crone actually claimed, what she actually wrote, as opposed to what Jay claims she said, which is that Mecca never existed, and that's not something she remotely ever said.
Someone said, like a traveling car boot sale. That's about the level of quality of most of the goods that they were exporting, yes. And it's significant because this is Crona. Jay Smith is up here saying that this is a standard Islamic narrative that Crona is going against. Crona is explaining that no, the Islamic sources don't have them trading with gold. You know, there are a couple of weird mentions from later on, but they don't have them trading with gold. They don't really have them trading with silver, which, as she herself said, she just gets confused at it. But anyway, but they have money at various times.
Right. So the
Perfume,
money's got to
yeah.
either be silver coins or gold coins, right?
Yeah, well,
I mean,
well, she was
that's-
talking about the silver coins as if it's silver, and I'm like, it's not the same thing. They're both importing and exporting silver coins. I'm like, yeah, they're buying stuff on their way north.
yeah,
and then they're coming back with the silver. I'm just very
coins.
confused. Anyway,
yeah, I mean, if you're
yeah,
trading in
that's
gold,
not a good
it's
one.
on processed gold, so to speak.
Right.
Exactly the right word, but not turned into coins, right?
Right. So I pointed out that the only place that there is unprocessed silver, that's just silver that has been purified, is in the place whenever they need to have a different, they can't buy from the people they normally buy from. They can't rely on that, and they need to have a certain amount of profit for their trip. So they're buying up silver, hoping to trade Syria for a profit. Oh, it will definitely be a flea market. I like that, because Muhammad talked about all the profits. Fleas be upon him, bitten to death by fleas, and how fantastic it was. All right, so she mentions perfume, and this is really interesting because I was unable to find any source, and I looked for trade in perfume because there seemed to be a lot of women making perfume in the Islamic sources. So I looked for sources that said that they trade in perfume, and I just missed them. There are sources that say that people traded in perfume, and what's interesting is that every source that talked about them trading anything specific to a place that is other than Syria or Yemen had them bringing perfume with them. And that would be perfume from Yemen, because just like now, you know, you have your secrets of formulation and stuff. In the ancient world, they had their secrets of formulation, and Yemen perfume was valued in various places. So it seems that at some time, some Meccans went to places and got money for perfume that they brought with them. And we'll talk in a little bit about when they could have traveled to places other than Yemen and Syria, because, of course, in Muhammad's lifetime, the only places anyone goes is Yemen and Syria, which is kind of weird because you have all this, and then they went to this place and that place and this place and that place. Is it entirely fictional? I think that it may not be. It's embroidered, but I don't think it's really fictional. Here's the important one: leather. Leather, 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 leather. It's one of the most important things, and along that, karaz or kars, as it's, I found it in modern sources as well, which is a plant that was made in tanning. They would take probably the seed pods, maybe, and but that had massive amounts of tannins in them. Whenever they were tanning, that's what they used. And they brought these north along with the hides to the north. Here's something that she never figures out. Here's a question: where did the Meccans get so many hides? Why would Mecca have lots and lots of animal hides compared to other places?
Because of animal sacrifices.
There you go. She never figures that out. She never figures out why it is that the Meccans are trading the leather and how they could have significant quantities of leather. I think she just doesn't know anything about historical animal husbandry, which, like, not that big of a problem.
I mean, it would be surprising, right? Okay,
very few people do.
It would be surprising if it was just a random rural desert, whatever, community, that they would have a lot of animals to be killing, and thus a lot of hides.
Right.
But it is very consistent with it being a place of pagan worship. People who are not Meccans, right, come there, they sacrifice an animal, and then they sell the hide to the Meccans.
Have to give the hide to them,
or
that
give, sell or give, whatever.
Mean, that might be part of the requirement of it, that, you know, you're here sacrificing it, we get your hides. And she doesn't quite understand that hides just weren't everywhere. She wasn't actually bothered about them having a huge number of hides. She didn't care that
well,
camels
would-
were
I
loud,
find that
loaded
weird.
with thousands and thousands of hides. Didn't occur to her. Like, not that was that many, but still, like, she would have accepted that because she seems to think that there were just animal hides everywhere and popping out of everything. She doesn't understand that people in antiquity did not eat meat in the same way that we do now. They're not in the Paleolithic. They're not subsisting. Meat is a special occasion thing. If you have a female animal, very often it would be a replacement for its mother. Very often. If you had a male, then you would be much more likely to kill it and eat it, but you just didn't have that many to eat from a flock. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. But she's like, oh, there's all this, the sources are just full of references to leather. And she points out tents. Yeah, the Quraysh, they're always in tents of leather. Muhammad is never found in a woven tent. It's only leather. And that's weird for the desert, because in the desert, it's usually, the desert, it rains so little, and it typically doesn't rain heavily enough that the woven black goat hair is usually enough to absorb the rain, and the hair kind of swells up and absorbs quite a lot of it. So typically it doesn't even get drippy inside if you just have this loosely woven goat hair tent. You very, very, very rarely get wet. But yet the Quraysh are here, and what are they doing? They're using leather for everything. So it's pretty impressive. And the other big thing is the clothing. And the clothes were the thick and coarse clothes of the Hijaz. These are mostly produced by other people. So the Bedouins who are weaving, the settled people who are weaving, who are producing cheap, basic clothing. And she just doesn't like the idea that they're selling cheap clothing. She doesn't think it would be worth it to carry across long distances. Again, she just doesn't get economics here, frankly. Yes, the peasants in Syria who are farmers wove their own clothes. Do you know who didn't weave his own clothes? The day laborer who has no animals. He didn't weave his own clothes. The slave master who had a slave who was a rough laborer, his slave didn't weave his clothes, and he didn't weave their clothes. They needed to buy them. And if the Hijazi people and the Bedouins are willing to take less money for it than any professional weaver in Syria will take, they would happily pay for it. It just has to be cheaper than what's locally produced. And if you're talking about the expense of the trip itself actually is, they already have the camels. They get milk from the camels. They're spending their time doing this, but what else would they do? They need these things. They're willing to sell for less because they need grain. This is their lifestyle is a very poor lifestyle. They're not getting a ton of money for this, all things considered, but they're getting what they need, and it's worth it to them. And meat does indeed come in leather packaging, but unfortunately they don't get to unwrap that packaging very often. So, and he's like, it makes even less sense because the Hijazis were importing clothing from Syria and Egypt and Persia and all these places. Why were they importing it if they were exporting it? Oh my goodness. This is like saying, why are Italians importing t-shirts from China when they are exporting suits? But kind of the opposite, why are the Chinese exporting cheap clothes when they are importing high fashion from the West? She just doesn't get economics. I'm sorry.
Apparently, because pretty much every good that the United States exports, it also imports. So both export and import a good is not exactly all that strange. Now, obviously, America's a giant country, and you're talking about a single city or a small geographic region, but I mean, the point is still the same,
Right.
right? Just because you export a category of good, it doesn't mean you don't import that category as well. Yeah, you're not importing literally the exact same thing. Obviously, that would be stupid. You don't
Right.
sell it and then buy it back, but you buy something in the same category, that would be perfectly ordinary.
Yes, because they can't. Guess what? In Egypt, they were exporting linen, but they were importing silk. Why would they be doing that? They're exporting linen, but importing silk. That's so weird.
I mean, they're both clothing, right?
They're both clothes. That's what they're doing. They're importing something that's cheaper exporting something that's cheaper and importing something that's more expensive. Yeah, because they didn't have access to the other thing. And they did have enough customers that when they sold off tons and tons of this cheap, coarse cloth that was used by poor people who did not weave clothing themselves, then they had, some of them had enough money to occasionally buy something pretty. But you also have people in these narratives who have so little money that, like, they don't have enough money to buy enough cloth to cover their privates when they do their bowing with their butt up in the air. Their dingles dangle and are super visible to everybody. People are like, I'm getting flashed. So, like, you have people in silks, and then you have people who don't have skirts long enough to cover their balls when they bow down, like, in the same place. This is not, I don't understand why she's confused by this. So this is just kind of
what
bad
people
thinking.
live at different economic levels in the same city.
I know,
oh my
right?
goodness, I've never heard of such a thing.
So we also there are also a few mentions with, as we said, trading almost entirely. They were trading camels that they picked up going north to Syria. There's also some verses making fun of them about them selling some donkeys near Yemen. So apparently some trader down in Yemen saw some cheap donkeys and thought some other tribes would like them and sold the donkeys to the tribe. And for some reason that made people make fun of them. I'm not sure why, because Muhammad was really proud of his donkey. So maybe these were crappy donkeys. I don't know. I don't know why you'd make fun of them for selling donkeys, but they got made fun of for selling donkeys to one tribe at one time. So there's also clarified butter, and she is super confused by the clarified butter. I don't know why, because she reads Kister, and he has some beautiful sources on this that really woke me up to how poor. This was one of my first wake up calls to how poor the Quraysh were. Why? Because the Quraysh, they did not see that it was beneath them to sell clarified butter when other Arabs refused to sell it. So most Arabs would not sell their clarified butter. If you clarify butter, it will stay for a long time and won't go rancid even really hot climates. That's why you clarify it for preservation. But the Quraysh were known to sell their clarified butter to whomever wanted it. She's like, it's exporting colds to Newcastle. It's like, no.
So
she's just not getting it.
Why would it be undignified? Because you want to keep it for yourself, because it's good stuff, basically.
Yeah, it's like your best stuff. It's like the cream of the crop, so to speak, and you'd keep it for yourself and for your own food, and you wouldn't descend to the level of selling something that is delightful that you make for yourself. And when there is a story of this wealthy man who bought clarified butter from really far away, why are they exporting it but also importing it? Well, there was a really good rich guy who could pay for extra butter. That's why. These are spaced many years apart. There was a famine in the land, and he brought in butter, among other things. During the famine, well, a lot of their animals died, so they didn't have any at all. So I don't know. That's just a really sloppy one to me too. She mentions that raisins are only mentioned as being imported from Taif to Mecca, which is true. Taif had some. He sold donkeys. He did indeed. You should talk about Yafur too, Mr. Yafur. You should tell your donkey Yafur about the selling of donkeys. I don't know, very odd. Anyway,
I mean, why would it be odd to sell donkeys though?
I don't know why they were making fun of them for selling donkeys. There must be some sort of
maybe it's kind of like the butter thing, that the donkey is a very useful work animal, so you would only sell it if you were really poor. I don't know.
Well, it definitely was that, Yafur was the fanciest mount that Muhammad had until he got sent a mule. And a mule sounds funny to us, like, oh, a mule, it's a work mule, right? No, mules were what princes rode in the classical era. So this white mule was a super fancy schmancy. You had, for war, you had horses, but for like a big parade where you want the most elegant and beautiful animal, a lot of times you would have a mule. I guess usually they were very steady and unlikely to shy too. So that would probably be part of it. They had very nice gaits. Mules were like the kind of the mounts of prestige at the time. But before that, Muhammad had a donkey, and that was his prestige mount. Other people had camels. He had a donkey. He was super special with his donkey. So maybe it was that they had no money to keep a donkey themselves. There were no donkeys in Mecca, not a single donkey in Mecca. He managed to get his handle on donkey Medina. But that here they are going off selling what they could not possibly afford to keep themselves to other people. So that may have been it. Anyway, there were vineyards in Taif, and those are the only vineyards. Wine was taken, was also produced in Taif as well. But Syria was the main place from which wine was imported. So that was a big import of things. Slaves, there was no active slave trade. And something she missed was the Hum's ban on doing slave raiding. So during this late pre-Islamic time, they couldn't have been professional slavers because they did not involve themselves in slave raiding. And really, the Meccans tried to keep their nose out of trouble. They wanted to be on good terms with everybody because they wanted to be able to trade through lands without being slaughtered without people wanting to rob them or slaughter them. So they really wanted to avoid the kind of controversy that would come to you if you were the person who was actively slave raiding your neighbors. So nice comment. All right. And then she mentions, there was a person who sharpened arrows, but that doesn't mean that they were making it for export. Absolutely agree. The only arrows were made for local consumption. So pretty much the only trade was leather, woolen goods not produced by the Qurayshi, but by neighbors as they went through, they bought up, would sometimes buy excess livestock from neighbors, not from themselves really, and some degree of trading in perfume, but not all that much. That's what you have.
What about the butter?
Oh yeah, and the butter, but there would have been a terribly huge amount of that because that would only come from their own animals, and they didn't have all that many. So, here she
about
was
to start a new section. Let me take a couple super chats from Song of Relief.
Sir, how can we contribute financially for your organization? They get in touch with me. And very easy, people know where I am. And once they get in touch with me to contribute without causing problem, to contribute in big amounts. And many people call me for lunch and for dinner and for meal, and for every meal they give big amounts, alhamdulillah. So those who really want to contribute, they come and meet me.
So Zakir Naik, whose voice resembles that of an animal apologist, so, with the advice there on how to donate, Bongo says, will there ever be a David Wood animal apologist? I don't know. I mean, I think I'll probably just limit it to Muslim da'is, but anything is possible. And then Pants Schmantz with a related super chat.
Yo, if David Wood gets a voice on here, I will defeat him soundly. He can't argue with triangles and squares.
Very nice.
No one can defeat the triangle square argument. It is undefeated in the hyena apologist's mind. Thank you very much for those donations. All right, continuing on.
You know, I was picking at her analysis of economics, but still, who does she agree with? Me or Jay Smith on what the Islamic sources, what the standard Islamic narrative actually says about trade.
I mean, she's like 95% in agreement with you. You have some minor disagreements, but Jay doesn't think there was any trade because he doesn't think there was any people, which is completely silly.
But he thinks that the standard, this is on the Islamic sources. He thinks that the standard Islamic narrative says they traded in fine spices. That's what he says. That's what he thinks.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right.
Fair enough. I was answering a different question than what you asked.
Yep.
So she says that the Islamic sources say that they're trading in leather, clothing, butter. She seems to think silver, but that was just a misunderstanding of the source there.
Really
Jay thinks that the Islamic sources say they're trading in spices and silk and other fine goods. So yeah, there's not much agreement between her and Jay.
And who is she in agreement with? What have I been saying all along? That they are heavily leather traders. And it's shocking how much leather, and that you can't find a single Qurayshi woman ever weaving. She only does leather. And so I was really puzzled. Where the heck is they getting all this leather from? And oh my gosh, the animal sacrifice, of course. That's why they have all this leather. That's why they're all focused on the leather. Because they can get more money for a fully tanned hide than they can for raw hide that's just been scraped. So, next question is, where were they active? Meaning, with whom did they trade? Who were their trading partners? And here, she covers the Ilaf tradition, but then she gets really confused about the history in various places. So, there is this main tradition in the Ilaf tradition is that in the time of Hisham, which should be about, she actually gives more credence to how old Abdul Muttalib was supposed to be when he died. I give no credence to him being super old when he died. I just take the whole needing to delay the ages of the sons or for a particular narrative purpose. So I'm just going, no, I'm going with the average age of intergenerational age. In terms of the male line in antiquity, it was generally 32, 34 years, something like that. So on average, son to son to son to son, down paternal lines, is a little bit more than 30 years each. Working with Muhammad's age, just go ahead and letting him be born in 570, even though I think he was born 4 years later, letting him be born in 570. You work back to Mecca turning into an actual town in about 450. And Hisham is particularly active at around age 30, around 510 or so. So Hisham, around 510-ish, he manages to get agreements for safe passage so that they could send out caravans for the first time. Before this, the Meccans could not trade themselves. They could only act like the other Bedouins, where if a trader came by, then you do local trade with them, taking your goods, giving them to the traders, and then buying what you want in return. Other people were passing by and taking little jaunts out to sell to them, not because they were on the path, but because they were a market to sell to, and they were buying. The Meccans couldn't trade because they didn't have agreements with all the tribes to be able to pass through without getting slaughtered, robbed, slave raided, and all the rest of that themselves. So Hisham took a trip up through Syria. And there's this elaborate story with him. Oh, he's totally going to the, he became friends with the emperor and gave him food, and now the emperor likes him, so he's able to ask for this. And that is very much projecting Arab culture onto the emperor of Rome. But as goofy as it is, it's indicative that this was a very, very early story, maybe even a pre-Islamic story, because the people telling the story have no idea what Roman culture is like. So they're turning it into Arab culture. Regardless, he managed to get an agreement of trade, like, we will accept trade from you guys from Rome. At this time, this is significant because just shortly before, Rome had taken as clients not just the Gonessids, who are their main clients just immediately to the south of the Roman Empire, but the Kenda kingdom, which controlled all but the Tihama and little bits and certain parts of the Hijaz. Kenda controlled that route. Kenda is an ally of whom now? Of Rome. They're clients. So with this document saying, you have safe, not necessarily safe passage, but we want to trade with you guys, they went through the lands of their clients. They're like, look, Rome wants to trade with us. We have this trade agreement with Rome. Will you let it? You're going to let us through, right? And they're like, yeah, because what? They're the clients of Rome. So they're going to make Rome happy and not attack traders that Rome recognizes. This was the first of the Ilaf agreements. Now, according to Islamic sources, Hisham goes and dies the time after that. And then at some other point in time, supposedly 3 other individuals go to 3 other places and they all get the same kind of agreements. But if you look at the history, you understand why they would need other agreements to trade and why they could get it at certain times. So Hisham dies maybe 520 or something like that. In 525, the Kenda kingdom falls apart. And part of Kenda, that there's fighting amongst like 4 of his sons and grandsons and other stuff of the Kenda king, right? And part of those folks try to ally with the Persians. Others ally with the Ethiopians, who had just then raided in the south into Yemen and taken over Yemen. And so now you have this fracture where being allied with Rome cannot get you through the Kenda parts of the area. So now this gives context to why they needed to go to those other places to get the trading agreements with those other places. So if these tribes are allied to any of these groups, now they have agreements with Ethiopia and Yemen, which are the same thing. Ethiopia and Yemen. That's funny. The news streams, they've gotten 2 large streams to say zoot zoot on super chats. That's fantastic. The U.S. is zooting the Iranian government hard. Zoot zoot. Fantastic. So they had to negotiate with these other polities to even continue to trade with Syria. And remember, they really want to trade with Syria because Syria has the market for their goods. But now that they have gotten these agreements, now they can trade with Yemen, which they really like doing. They can also trade with whom? The Sasanians, the Persians, and take that route out. And so they continue to do trading most heavily with Syria, because that's where they can sell their goods and they can get nice, cheap
Yemen doesn't want any of their crap. They got
based.
enough fancy stuff from India and whatnot.
Yeah, but Yemen was kind of where they can get their fancy stuff. Like they can get their fancy stuff from Yemen, and they can sell their basics that they need to sell to get food up in Syria. So this works out for them for a while. Because Kenda has fallen apart, they get grabby. They want to control that trade route the way Kenda used to. Not the whole thing, not the whole thing, but the ukaz market, and maybe extract, do a shakedown, because they're bandits of people passing along on the route. There's a story of them basically robbing a merchant from Yemen, and some of the people want to say, look, we just took it from them. We're allowed to do that. We have the power. We can do that. And the other people are like, no, we need to watch out and not be too jerky, because some of these powers might come and Hulk smash us. So the League of Virtue is, we don't want to be Hulk smashed. And the Alliance of Allies, because we have stupid names, the Alliance of Allies, or the Confederacy of Confederates, is the other group. And it's actually the other group that were the biggest traders of all, which is kind of funny. They really wanted to control this part of the area, and wanted to basically shake folks down for as much as they could, whereas the other folks are like, look, we need to take a more moderate stance and extract our tolls, because everybody extracts tolls, but only to an extent. So they compensated this guy, but then when Year of the Elephant came, they were really nervous that their control of the ukaz market and other, their extraction of toll, but people passing through, that was the focus of Abraha going north. Well, it turned out he didn't care about them at all. He thought as soon as he got these other guys in line, everything would be fine, which, he conquered them. It was fine. He won. And then he came back. Successful trip. Successful, not a failure.
What? The Quran is wrong?
Yeah, crazy. And then Abraha dies of old age sometime after that. And the Sasanians take over. And shortly after the Sasanians take over, the Lakhmids get really annoyed at the Meccans. And they use as a pretense a dispute between this group's allies and this other group's allies over leading a caravan to the ukaz market. They use this as an excuse to basically pick a war and fight the Meccans at the ukaz market every year for 4 years. What are they doing? They're basically not letting them hold the market. When the market starts, we're going to raid you and we're going to chase you away. Well, finally, the 4th year of this continuous not letting them hold the market, because it's a yearly market for very short, it's like 2 weeks long, once a year, and it's where the Meccans sell most of their stuff. So they're being massively economically impacted by this. The 4th year that they do this, the Meccans actually manage to kill a few of their folks. And so they come to terms, they have peace. And from this point forward, there is no longer an Ilaf agreement with Persia. It's over. They're not friends with Persia anymore. So there are these two contradictory stories in the sources. One of which was the Quraysh did not trade, and then they had the Ilaf agreements, and they began trading all over the place. And then the other one is that they used to trade all over the place, and then they realized that it took their attention from God. These, as they're pagan, right? Right? So the pagans, all their devotion to Allah, aka Hubal, I guess, decided that they should not trade anymore. Well, guess what? They're both true, because the Quraysh did not trade. Then they got the Ilaf agreement with the Syrian, with the Romans, and then they managed to spread it so that they could trade in Yemen and they could trade in Persia too. And then they ticked off the Persians, so they couldn't trade with the Persians anymore. In these later sources, we seem to find the turnaround point of the trade into Yemen being Najran. So while the Sasanians officially controlled all of Yemen, in reality, the Sasanian governor really just controlled his own city, and each independent other city basically controlled its surrounding lands. As long as they listened to and obeyed the governor, he left them alone. So there were no real Sasanian presence anywhere outside of the capital that the governor had taken. So they could trade safely in Najran with the local governor being there and being fine with them trading there. But if they had gone too far close to the Sassanians, they might have gone, we know you guys. Lahmids don't like you, do they? And they're our clients. There might be problems. But they weren't important enough for them to care about. So they were just, they now just curtailed their trade up to Najran. So other people had to bring all the goods to Najran for them to even take back to Mecca. So Crona gets that there's this conflict and understands the first story and that there's this other narrative. She did not understand the political context. She even knew about Kinda Kingdom and people sent there, but she didn't somehow, like, the alliances escaped her and the importance of it and the context and how it actually fits into history. She just misses that. And she's just like, oh, well, this just doesn't make any sense because it's two contrary sources. How can this make any sense? And, it's a basic principle that the earlier source is better than the later source. And the earlier source says that they stopped trading out so much. So that must be true. So what are all these stories about raids? Maybe they weren't raiding at all. I'm like, oh my gosh, Patricia Crone, no. Honey, pay attention to all the sources. Anyway, so here is where she gets way off trying to make them work together. But I do agree with her. Her big point is that the sources from the Muhammad's career time are very, very clear that they are trading with Syria. They're absolutely trading with Syria. And they seem to also be trading down to Najran too. And there was no organized trade anywhere else in the sources. There's no instance of trading, even one instance of trading to anywhere else in the world by the Meccans in the narratives during Muhammad's career. They just don't exist. But again, that works with the actual historical context of everything that was going on that she just, I don't know, wasn't paying attention to. So she discounts any possibility that they were still trading with those areas and doesn't understand how that would fit quite beautifully with the contradictory. They used to trade out a lot, but now they really don't, versus they couldn't trade and now they do. Like, yeah, there was expansion. There's also a lot of, there's clear fall of wealth in Mecca after Abdul Muttalib's generation. So Hashem and Abdul Muttalib, they have the wealthiest generation. And it's clear from the number of wives, the number of children, the number of slaves, they just don't have the money that they used to have. And yeah, they had been poor, but they've been a lot richer poor than they were in Muhammad. And there was just a lot of pressure on them and on their town, just not having nearly as much profit as they had previously done because of everything being much more restricted. So,
right, just because they are not the wealthiest people in the world doesn't mean they can't go up or down, right? They can, and what you're saying is they were less poor than in the previous generation, right? So relatively wealthy. And just to be clear,
houses at some point, but go ahead.
And just to be clear, these parts of Patricia Crone's work that you don't agree with are not things that agree with Jay either.
No,
right?
No, they don't. They do not.
You don't agree with her understanding of the historical events, but his understanding is a million miles away from Jay as well.
Yes.
So it's not like you're just rejecting that part because it supports him or something, right?
Correct. It might be in some ways closer to the understanding of Robert Spencer, where it's, well, one thing says this and this one says the opposite. So who knows what it is? It's kind of what she does in some places, which is something that Robert Spencer does, but that's not something that Jay Smith says. He does not say that the sources are contradictory. He says that they have this glorious whatever, which he absolutely does not say.
Yeah, so, I mean, he says they're clear myth. He doesn't say that,
correct.
There's contradictions and we should throw them out because there's contradictions. He's like, the sources are clear myth. They're written in the 9th century, 10th century, 11th century, and they have nothing to do with historical reality. So that's a very different position than what Patricia Crone takes.
Right. So now that, we've already dealt with Patricia Crone not being the one to come up with, it's not on, she proved that it was not on the incense road. We've already dealt with that's nonsense. This is the one that talks with Makaraba and the rest. This whole Mecca in the ancient sources. So she makes 3 points. She reinforces that it's not a transit trade. There's no transshipment. She doesn't, she had said, there's perfume that gets shipped, but it stops off in Mecca for like 6 months before it gets shipped on. So it's not like this continuous transit trade, right? Even if the perfume, the one thing from Yemen that they sell in Syria in some quantity, still not a transit trade. The second thing she points out, that it's not the kind of trade that attracted the attention of the inhabitants and the Fertile Crescent. That's 100% correct. She's just like, this is just the trade that everyone's been doing all the time. Have a question. Is any tribe mentioned selling leather to the Romans? No, because it's not anything that attracts anybody's attention. It's just this low-grade trade that just happens of commodity-level goods. No one pays any attention to who's doing it. No one cares. They're not like exotic goods bringing something super special in. They're commodities. This is commodity-level goods. Nice. No transshipment. The war are going to be disappointed. Nice. So then at this point, she is talking about how it wasn't noticed. This is not everything that's been described so far is not anything that would be noticed. And they were not middlemen in this long distance trade. This is not things that are noticed.
Wait,
And
you
she's
mean in the limited amount of resources documenting the ancient world, they're not talking about ordinary daily trade that takes place everywhere and saying every city that it takes place in? That's astonishing. Why weren't they recognizing that Mecca was a plain ordinary city? So strange.
So she says, Greek and Latin authors had, after all, written extensively about the South Arabians who supplied them with aromatics in the past, offering information about their cities, tribes, and political organization and caravan trade. Not all their cities, but, they'd mentioned the important ones. In the 6th century, they similarly wrote about Ethiopia and Odalus, like one city in Ethiopia. They also wrote about the coastal ports, right? The political and ecclesiastical importance of Arabia in the 6th century was such that a considerable attention was paid to Arabian affairs. Like Nonsus was sent down. But again, this was to the kingdom of Kinda, because guess who controlled it at that time? Kinda controlled it till 550. But of the Quraysh and their trading center, there's no mention at all. And I do want to point out, there's no trading center. But anyway, be it in the Greek, Latin, Syriac, Aramaic, Coptic, or other literature composed about outside of Arabia before the conquest. So J. Smith believes that she's like searching these sources herself personally to find them, because this is just mentioned. She is not searching the sources to find them. She is noting that people who have read these sources over years have no recollection of this. She's not running to the originals. J. Smith is making this up. He's inventing it because it sounds good. And Akkadian. Apparently,
yeah.
Checking Akkadian.
and she does Akkadian. Right. So notice the pattern, right? What does J. Smith report? Whatever makes the best story. So he have said that many people have done this research and this is what they've concluded. Sure, but that's not a great story. A great story is this one person who happens to be my advisor. They alone were standing against the tide of academia and doing this research no one else was willing to do, right? That's a much better, more grand story. Even if the same information is conveyed, one way sounds really cool. It sounds really innovative, sounds really important. And fits with the idea of a grand conspiracy. The other is the reality. And Jay always goes for the most sensational way to present something, and in the
With
process
no
greatly distorts the reality
for
right?
accuracy. No regard for accuracy. Not even a tiny bit. Absolutely no regard. Let's see what he specifically says about her. So one of the things that he has 3 different little speeches that he likes to give about her. So, I did it word for word in from one particular one, but he gives this with variants and many different ones. Then you have to get to what Dr. Patricia Crone did. I don't think Raymond Ibrahim has ever read, really. He mentioned Hagarism, but he didn't read the 1987 book called Mecca Trade and the Rise of Islam. Whoops, sorry.
Pause for 1 second, just in case, just for people who tuned in late. That's literally what's on the screen. That's what we've been going through.
Yep, we've been going through that. And he's just stating that Raymond Ibrahim has never read this.
Mm-hmm.
Does Jay Smith have any idea what Raymond Ibrahim has read or hasn't read? No.
No, well, he says, I don't think. He did say, I don't think.
No, he said, I don't think he has ever read, really. He mentioned Hagarism. Then he says he didn't read the 1987 book called Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam. So he just positively says.
Because he didn't mention, that's interesting. So Jay starts saying, I don't think he's read it. And then he said, but he mentioned this book and he didn't mention this one. So he could not have read that second one. Very strange stuff.
So then he says, that's the book that shut down Mecca, and it's been around for almost 30 years now. He loves shut down. No, it did no such thing. In that book, she went back to the original, and I'm skipping some of his stuttering and uhs and ums and everything else because, humans speak in imperfect sentences, but I edited out
especially me
repetitive things. Yeah. She went back to the original documents of all these, and then he had previously said 15 archaic languages that she reads and writes, and she read them in their original tongue. And she looked and she strove to find any people or any place or any civilization that would know about this city called Mecca. So she went to the Assyrians, she went to the Romans, she went to the Babylonians, she went to the Persians. No reference to Mecca and at all in any of their writings. So she decided to get closer to Mecca. She went to the Nubians, which are across the Red Sea. She went to the Nabateans, which is up north. She went to the Himyarites. She went to the Asherites. All of these civilizations surround what is Mecca today. No reference to any place called Mecca. That is complete nonsense. Here are the sources that she considered to be potentially applicable. Greek, Latin, Syriac, Aramaic, Coptic. Or literature composed outside of Arabia before the conquest. So what she says.
Okay, so let me just be clear. What Jay is trying to say, or the picture he's trying to paint, let me put it that way, is that she looked at every source in every language that could theoretically mention Mecca, and she didn't find it in any source. So it's not just she knows all these language. She literally read every single source document written in the 7th century, the 6th century, the 5th century, the 4th century, and she couldn't find Mecca anywhere.
That the 9th century BC is what he is arguing, that she has read every scrap of paper or every scrap of everything. She went to the original sources.
For 1,600 years. That was it. I mean, this is just moronic on the face of it, right? I mean, I say that, but at the same time, when I heard Jay first say this many years ago, it sounded reasonable to me, right? That I mean, I didn't literally think that she was saying
yeah.
1600 years, but it seemed reasonable that she went and read the trade logs and whatnot. I mean, I wasn't really thinking what would that even mean, but that she made an attempt, at least, to find all the original sources that the primary documents.
Mhm.
But you go to the book, and what is it actually? It's referencing, attributing other people's research, which is
Right.
perfectly fine and valid
Yes.
academically, but it doesn't fit with Jay's story.
Yeah. So this is just absolute nonsense. So what is she actually saying? So what is Conociendo el Islam say? What is talking about peers?
It was just a
to
joke.
what?
So
Oh.
Raptor said, Raymond Abraham just simply isn't a peer of Jay, though.
Nice.
And then Constantia said, did he have peers? Well, I don't know if Jay has any peers. You know, I don't know if there's
he's off doing
anyone
his
who
own
can
thing.
live up to his standard.
He's off doing his own thing and out there on a limb, just making things up and teaching them as truth. So she goes here and she just debunks based on what? On etymology that Makaraba on Ptolemy's map is Mecca. She's saying that, yeah, it's located on a latitude that can absolutely fit Mecca. It is a latitude that has been ascribed to Mecca. In some sources in the past, it could be Mecca. But on that alone, you shouldn't say that that's Mecca on Ptolemy's map of all things. And it makes absolutely no etymological sense. And
So she's saying that the idea is silly, basically.
Yes,
which
she
we would
says it
agree
can be
with.
dismissed out of hand in another place. So she says that the classical author should have failed to mention Mecca and the Qadesh is not a problem. Why read them? And it's not a problem. Not a problem. What does Jay say? She
discovered it was a massive problem. She proved it was a massive problem.
No, she says it is not a problem. Why read them into Pliny and Ptolemy when his authors, such as Procopius, Nononsus, and the Syriac churchmen, who ought to have referred to them? That is, if they're important. These are where you should look for it. You should not look for it where? In the classical authors. Don't look for it. It doesn't matter. So then it gets even worse. And here, whereas the first source to name it fails to locate it in Arabia, he's like, she found this account. She found it. It's the Continuato of Arabica, which J. Smith confuses for Pseudo-Methodius. He thinks that they're the same thing. And he's like, she found this. She found this. Oh, they found this. But she didn't realize it was in the wrong place. Yeah, she did. She footnoted it right here. She didn't realize it was in the wrong place. We now have Mel to tell us it was in the wrong place. She didn't read it far enough. No, she didn't think that it mattered all that much because, again, this is a Hispanic source.
Yeah, well, she relegated it to a footnote, acknowledges it, but doesn't think it's important enough to mention in the body of the text.
No. So anyway, so she says, assuming that there was such a thing as a Qadeshi trade, the silence of the sources must thus be explained with reference to the nature of the trade itself. There is nothing in the Islamic tradition to suggest that it should have attracted attention outside of Arabia. So,
look, she's saying the exact same thing we say.
That Procopius, Nononsus, and the Syriac churchmen didn't mention them, except that the trade that's described would not have attracted any attention. The sale of leather goods, woolens, perfume, nobody cares. So
yes, but they're trading cheap goods. There's probably hundreds of villages trading the same sort of thing, and it doesn't garner any special attention. So you wouldn't expect it to be mentioned in sources that are only talking about the highlights.
Yeah.
And so it's not weird that it's not mentioned by name.
Enough. They don't want. They're interested in these areas, but not in people who don't have that much of value to trade. I mean, yeah, they need the leather, but they don't need it that much. Anyway, she didn't go the Nabateans. Nabatean didn't even exist at this time. She didn't go search the Persian records. And guess what? The Persian records don't have mention of practically any place in here. She didn't go to the Himyarites. They don't have mention of practically any place either. They have a few scattered inscriptions. Nubians, why would she have gone to Nubia? Nubia doesn't feature in it at all. If they meant Aksum, the Ethiopians, they didn't have any written history until like the 15th century AD. What would she be reading? She's not an
She
idiot.
read
She's
all
gonna
the sources from the 7th century, Mary, including the ones
And then
that don't
he
exist.
mentions the Asherites. They aren't even a people. They're made up. The Asherites don't exist. So then he goes, so she says then, well, hold on a minute. It could be that Mecca was so insignificant. Obviously, see how stupid that sounds, that maybe they forgot to write about it. Is that what she says? She does not say it sounds stupid. She says the trade here is insignificant. She positively says the trade is described as insignificant.
Yeah. So did he just, so is that actually a quote of Jay?
That's his quote of Jay. So then she says, hold on a minute. It could be that Mecca was so insignificant. Obviously, see how stupid that sounds, that maybe they forgot to write about it. So she said,
okay,
let's look
so
at
he
other
just
places.
he called her stupid effectively.
Well, he's trying to act like she wouldn't actually take
No.
it seriously,
He's
but he did
saying
call her
that
stupid.
she wrote, right? That she wrote something,
Yes,
mockingly or whatever. I think that's what he's trying to say, is that she was mocking the idea that it couldn't have, that
yes,
they
which she
forgot to
absolutely
write
was
it.
not.
Which she was in fact positively saying this makes perfect sense.
Yes.
So in effect, he is actually, based on what she actually wrote, is saying, she's stupid for writing this.
Absolutely.
As he's trying to cite her in support
As he's trying to cite
of
her,
his
she's
view.
saying that her actual argument is stupid. See how stupid that sounds?
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh. My phone not suddenly is trying to listen to me for some insane reason. All right. And then she says, let's look at all the other places surrounding Mecca. Let's start with Aden and Sana and Najr and Taif and Yathrib and Khaybar and Tabuk and Gaza. And those are the major oases along the Western Plateau, all of them insignificant. Nevertheless, she was able to find reference after reference all the way back to the 4th century BC of every one of those places, and not one reference to the much more important place called Mecca. That is a lie, a dirty, filthy lie.
Where did she talk about any of those places?
She didn't. She mentions them in passing. There is no source that mentions Taif at all before the Islamic time. There is no source that mentions Tabuk because that's an Arab name for this area. So if you go to the sources, everything but Taif and Tabuk were mentioned in either Hellenistic, Greek, or Byzantine sources. You can find the other cities there mentioned at least one place. But only Gaza has a reference that could have dated back as far back to the 4th century BC. The other places would not have had a Hellenistic, Greek, or Byzantine source dating back that far. The Babylonians and the Syrians of that entire list mention only Gaza, Khaybar, and Yathrib. That's it. And those are from the 7th century BC. So that's 3 out of 8. Practically nothing of a genre that might have mentioned these places survives in the Nabatean dialect of Aramaic. There's no mention of any of these places. There's one graffito in Arabic using the Nabatean alphabet that mentions Yathrib before it was changed into the Arabic form, but it's in Arabic. There's no Aramaic. There's no Nabatean Aramaic reference to any of these places. If you're being wildly generous, you get 1 out of 8. No Aksumite written source, no Nubian source, 0 out of 8. There's no pre-Islamic Persian text mentioning any of these places, not because the Persians didn't even rule them, but because very little Persian writing survives from this era.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just so silly, right? It's just so silly.
So
and by the way,
dishonest.
Most of those places are desert regions, right? There should be no people there, according to Jay.
No people.
Right?
And he claims that
he literally points to the map and says, no one lived in this entire region. And then he says, But all these cities were known from that region. I mean,
Yeah.
what?
So anyway, so I really wanted to point that out because it's so massively dishonest, But she says the sale of leather goods, woolens, and perfumes in places such as Busra and Adriat was not likely to make headlines. It wasn't worth writing about. So then she says what Meccan trade may have been. And this is where she kind of gets off course because she's like confused about the fact that there's trade and that, but the trade is described as like there's no market in Mecca. Yet she kind of denies that the Quraysh control Ukaz because the Tamimim also do. But it's like, yeah, Mecca made agreements with other people to get cuts of things. No, that's where they sold their stuff. They sold their stuff here. So that's kind of confusing. She also gets a little bit caught up in the idea that there was this massive pilgrimage to Mecca at this time, thousands of pilgrims, their mounts and other animals on top of the local and human population. There weren't that, there were thousands, but we're talking sub 5,000, probably more like 2,000 being an impressively huge number to the people of that time. So it wasn't.
Is this simultaneously or over a year?
Yeah, during the Hajj. But you have to keep in mind how incredibly tiny the area around the
I mean, if you're a little town of 500 and 2,000 people come,
People show
that's
up.
going to be pretty.
Yeah.
That's going to be massive to you, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. But so she got all confused about the leather trade and everything else. But then guess what? She resolved it. She figured it out. So she realized in 2008 that the Romans really did need that much leather. It wasn't bringing coals to the new castle. She was totally wrong about that. So what she wrote was there was at least one organization.
Sorry, just to pause you real quick because you didn't make it clear. You're no longer on the book,
Correct.
right? You're now on her 2008 paper, which I can't quite read because the type is a little small. Quraysh and the Roman army.
No, Quraysh and the Roman army making sense of the Meccan leather trade. So this is her article where she was like, oh, I was super confused about this. Now I'm not. She said there was at least one organization capable of generating significant demand in pre-modern times, namely the state, and Arabia did lie on the doorstep of the Roman Empire. What the author of Meccan Trade did not know 20 years ago, and she's talking about herself here, it's 2007, sorry, 20 years ago, was that the Roman army swallowed up colossal amounts of leather. The army needed leather for tents, scabbards, shields, shield covers, baggage covers, kit bags, purses, horse armor, saddles, reins, and other horse gear, sandals, boots, belts, wineskins, water skins, as well as diverse slings, strings, laces, and straps for use in arms and clothing. On top of that, hides were used in military fortifications. It has been estimated that a single legion of the classical type, about 5,000 men, required the hides of some 65,700 goats or a smaller number of calves, simply for the tents used on campaigns. The number of cattle required to supply the troops with all the equipment and the leather that they needed must have been staggering. On top of that, of course, the soldiers needed food and clothing, and live animals were needed for transport. So even then, she doesn't grasp the scale of the problem. She doesn't quite understand how animals were used in antiquity. She seems to assume that they were meat markets then in the same way there are now. She thinks that leather is just leather, but female goats and sheep are overwhelmingly kept back to refresh them with ewes in the crop. The males who aren't kept for breeding, they were killed quite young because they taste revolting when they get older, especially back then. And the excess females were usually killed off young too. And when they were killed off young, their leather is no good for tents. They're no good for utilitarian use. They were good for softer uses, right? The only semi-utilitarian leather from these animals is from the adult breeding rams and the old ewes who get too old to breed. And that's the source. Old ewes and old rams are the source for those tents. For heavy-duty leather, you have to get it from cattle, donkeys, mules, horses, and camels. If you have a really, really old horse or a dead horse, you're going to skin it. You're going to use its leather because you need it. Cattle were mainly bred for milk and labor. As oxen, there was no meat industry in cattle as such. Steers were a byproduct of excess males born weren't needed as either oxen or to breed, and the vast majority of the females were kept back to replace their mothers later on. So you're not keeping these enormous herds of animals for meat. You're keeping what you want for dairy, and the meat is a byproduct. You just have way less animals slaughtered per human per capita then you do now. There was a relative shortage of meat at the time, and she just doesn't understand how ancient how food was in the ancient world. And I mean, that is its own specialty. Social history is its own thing, so I'm not knocking her too hard on that, but she just did not realize that. So that pretty much vitiated this entire argument about, it's where she's flailing throughout here. She's arguing this one, she's arguing that one, she's arguing this other thing, and she just doesn't understand how they can trade all the way from Mecca to Syria and it be economically worthwhile, because she's imagining that Syria is just awash in leather. And then later she finds out, oh, wait, they needed huge amounts of leather. Even then, she doesn't realize the problem of the scale. But that's basically the entire time she's just kind of going, well, why are they trading so far away for leather? Well, it's because they had leather. That they need food. They're going to trade for it to anyone who will buy it. Then finally, and the last,
so you're saying that they do the extraordinarily unusual thing of selling what they have excess of to buy what they have a lack of.
Right. And she just doesn't quite understand that at a fundamental level. She just thinks that they won't be able to sell it for enough money to feed for it to be worth it, but worth it is getting enough food.
I mean, if your options are $0 or, $1, you're going to take $1. I mean,
if that's the only way that you're going to get enough food to feed yourself.
If you're not raising the animals, right? If you're not raising the animals for purpose of their hides, and you have their hides, and you're going to sell their hides from some other reason, right? Then you're going to sell their hides for what you can get, assuming you need money.
Right. So I don't know. She just thinks that there's just going to be too many. She originally thought that there'd just be too many hides in Syria for there to be a decent market, but that's just not true. Anyway,
I mean, there's going to be a market. People need them, right? Even if it's not a decent market, there's still going to be a market.
A market, right.
Which means there are people who will sell it for that price, or there wouldn't be a market, right? That's kind of how supply and demand works. If it's not paying enough for anyone, then no one will produce it. So it will reach the level where it's the minimum that people will take for it. I mean, at minimum, right? Now, if it's scarce good, it could be much higher than the minimum someone would take for it. But there won't be a market at all if no one is willing to accept the price of which people will buy it.
Yeah, but she just thinks that there wouldn't be a market because they couldn't sell it for as much as like they would want to.
Okay, but some people clearly need to buy clothing, right? I mean, not everyone is making their own clothing. So there has to be a market.
Yeah. Anyway, so her last chapter, but she fixes that mostly by realizing how much they needed, even though she doesn't see the overall picture, doesn't quite understand economics, but that's okay. It's not her specialty. Her last chapter is her absolute worst. She does make one really good point, that what is it that she says? If Allah was a pagan god like any other, the Quraysh would not have allowed Hubal to share the sanctuary with him, not because they were proto-monotheists, but precisely because they were pagans. Somehow she doesn't understand that this means that Allah is Hubal for sure. She's like, some people think that, but no. You have the stone in the corner of the Kaaba, and you have Hubal inside. You accept that Hubal is inside the Kaaba, and you believe that the stone is in the corner. If both are true, and a certain shrine can only be to one God, then that God is the same God. And she just doesn't quite get that. But she gets...
I mean, in fairness to her, although you are quite certain about this is not something that most academics would be in agreement with. Now you can say they haven't done the research or whatever, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying.
Well, she does mention
on
the
this
people who say
issue,
that it
it's not
is.
like a deficiency. She's actually just agreeing with the consensus that we don't know.
Well, no, I mean, she's going, you can't say, but she did mention other academics who positively say that, they're totally the same God. But from her own logic, they have to be the same God. That's what cracked me up, is that she gave logic about it being only one place. I'm like, well, now you're committed, since you're like, this is for sure that they would not allow another God to be there, then Allah is Hubal. She also, this was a long time ago, doesn't know all the research about Allah and his identity and inscriptions and how he was very much pagan God. So there's that. The main thing that she gets confused about here is that she thinks that the trading, that the markets were haram areas just because people were in ihram while they were wearing them. So ihram is derived from haram. And so she thinks if you're wearing the clothes of pilgrimage and you're at a trading place, then necessarily you're in haram, a sacred space. No one ever calls any of these markets a sacred space. It's not a sacred space. They're not harams. So she's confused about that. She's confused about the idea that people would go.
So wait, hold on a second. So this would be like the equivalent, like you're going to a fancy ball or something. You put on your suit, but you also stop at the gas station to get gas, and you don't change your clothes, and therefore the gas station is actually the fancy party.
Yes, that's basically what she was arguing. So it was kind of just a mess. She doesn't seem to understand what makes a haram, and a lot of that research, to be fair, has been done recently in French. She read French, but it's been done more recently, so she wouldn't have had access to that, which describes these places as regions in which districts where you couldn't kill any animals, you couldn't cut down any plants, you couldn't till the soil. Does that sound familiar to you, Thaddeus? And
it does.
This was not in context of Mecca. Mecca was never mentioned in any of these sources. This was archaeological research about other sites in the ancient Near East, specifically in West Asia, where these were the features of these very special, super special shrine sites. Everybody can have a temple, but if you have a super duper special shrine site, you'd have a larger haram area in the Semitic. It's still HRM, even if it's not Arabic, this region where you couldn't do any of these things and you were forbidden from these things. And this was in the excavation of Al-Hijr and other places. It's talking about this. Mecca only fits the context. The reason that Mecca didn't have gardens is not because they didn't have enough water. They had wadis running through it. And shortly after the Islamic era, as I said, they planted gardens. They grew date palms. They hadn't done it before because of their pagan understanding of a sacred space. Whenever Qusay told them, hey, build your houses here, he was considered to be like, it was a dangerous and scary thing to do because you have to disturb the ground to build the houses. Mm-hmm. It took over a century longer for them to stick roofs on the houses, because to make a roof back then, you have to cut a bunch of brush and weave it together and then put mud over it. And they didn't want to cut down the brush, so they only had leather tent material basically as the roofs for a long time. And they only upgraded like in Khadijah's lifetime. That's how recently. Why? Because of all of these fears of violating the haram. That's why it's special. One shrine isn't interchangeable with another. And she just did not read Kister well, didn't understand how they were trying to build together this special pagan sect and really emphasize worship of Allah above the other deities and emphasize how important their shrine was over the other shrines because he's the central god. Like, just didn't get the religious context at all. And that was partly that she didn't have information about the excavations because they hadn't even been done yet. But also, she didn't read her Kister well enough because Kister had some of that. But aside from my criticisms of the places where she just didn't get things, overall, when she was analyzing the sources, she was in agreement with me most of the time for all my next.
And not only that, you said that her work helped you to formulate some of your ideas. So although it may have seemed like you were being highly critical of her because you emphasized the things you disagree on, you actually agree on quite a lot, right? You actually agree on quite a lot that's here. Meanwhile, Jay claims to, well, he doesn't just claim to agree. He claims this is his source, right? He claims that he is just repeating what she found out, when in fact he's saying something completely different than what she said, and what she says is not compatible with his theories at all.
Correct.
Correct. He central to his idea is that Mecca didn't exist at all. There was no such city. It did not exist until the 9th century, when it was created for unknown reasons. We'll get a question on that in a second.
Yeah.
But
Somebody mentioned Hijr is near Petra. Well, sort of. It's several hundred miles away. But when the other pagan shrines, like Hijr used to be a super, 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 super important pagan site. That entire area was entirely Christian. Totally Christian. No pagans. Before AD 400. 100% Christian. All the shrines shut down. Everything else. There is no paganism happening in Hijr. There's no weird factions happening in Hijr. Al-Hijr. There's no weirdness happening in Petra. It's not happening. It's all Christian. Completely Christian. Not a trace of paganism left. That's why the Bedouins, who were still pagan, now began to make more important this more obscure shrine place. They're getting people from farther away because their old shrines have been completely shut down. They can't go to them anymore. They're done. They've been done for 200 years. By the time Muhammad comes around, the old shrines have been defunct. So imagine claiming things about going to the colonial governor of Virginia in 1975, because that is the equivalent of what anyone who's arguing that Petra or Hijr is a site 200 years after, meaningless anymore. There's no pagan site. There's no colonialism. Hey, Blake, great to see you.
So got a couple of super chats and whatnot, but I'm going to start with this question, which was directly related to what I was just talking about. How does Jay imagine Mecca was chosen as the hub of the conspiracy religion of Islam?
You know what's
has this
really
ever been
stupid?
Explained?
He
And I
says
actually
that
can't think of his explanation. I think he has one.
Al-Hajjaj is from there, from the place that doesn't exist.
Wait,
So,
what?
Al-Hajjaj is like from Mecca, which doesn't exist.
Let me get this straight. They created a new city out of nothing
because Al-Hajjaj
because
is from
the
there.
leader of Islam was from
no,
there.
just a very important general. A very important general.
Sorry, general, whatever.
Yeah.
Important general was from there.
Yes. Like had some sort of special tie to that, but sometimes he's like from there. I'm like, but you're saying it doesn't exist. And he's just a general, for heaven's sake. But yeah.
Okay. That's probably why I didn't remember it. He probably doesn't talk about that. Because that sounds idiotic. All right. 50 gifted from Jack Ray.
I can't answer this question in a 20-minute interview, nor is it wise to do so, which is why I never brought this topic up myself. You will not find one lecture of mine about this issue. It should never be brought up in public. And I don't like these idiots, and they are idiots, wallahi. This is not something you discuss amongst the masses, ya akhi. It's not wise. I encourage anybody who is really interested to go deep to take the class. I do this class. It'll be 1 year later.
Thank you very much for all your support, Jack Ray. And remember, it's not wise to talk about Reasoned Answers memberships.
And I absolutely have to go shopping for a few pieces that I did not get so that we can get things.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is one question, but I can easily answer it. So we're good there.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Sorry I couldn't do it earlier, but plumbing calls. Bye.
Bye. All right. Just me and Artemis to finish this up. A super chat from Pan Schmantz.
Wasting your time on social media is one of the best deeds a Muslim can do. There's a huge need for it. You know this and I know this. So that makes the reward even greater. So give generously and Allah Azza wa Jal will give you even more.
Spices, what about camel wee? This isn't the question I referred to, even though it has a question mark. Yes, the trade of camel urine had not yet been started at that time. That wasn't until after Muhammad gave his insight from Allah that camel urine can cure your stomach aches. That's when they started trading it. So that part of the trade, Meccan trade, was not in place yet. I'm reminded that I'm short on leather and need to go leather shopping. That's funny. So this is the question I was talking about from Morkay. Let me ask this probably silly question. If Muhammad was boss of Khadija's caravan business and he was reselling all the stuff he stole from others, I think that would be a Maharaj. I put an M in. I don't know how to say it without an M. Maharbitrage. There you go. Maharbitrage. So just to be clear, the caravan raiding came later. During Khadija's lifetime, he wasn't stealing anything. In fact, in the early years of his prophethood, he wasn't stealing anything either. For the first 10 years, give or take, he was just going around saying about, oh, my poetry is so amazing. I must be a prophet of God. And he got like 5 followers. Then he said, my God has told me we are allowed to rob on caravans. And that's when he started to become popular. So different time periods. Good joke, though, about Maharmitrage, but different time periods. Super chat just came in from Jack Ray.
Yo, chat. Who's the rat? Malik. Malik is.
It's true. Malik is definitely the rat. We'll hopefully get a update on Malik and his recent activities soon on Apologetics Roadshow. Hasn't been scheduled yet, but probably get scheduled that early in the coming week. Finishing up 100 ways to respect the Quran for Quran Demolition Ranch. I gave that to David yesterday to see if he wanted to do the voiceover commentary or if he wanted me to do that. He said he'd look at it today and let me know. Either way, that should be out soon, because that, compared to editing together 100 different clips of Quran respecting, the commentary will be quite simple to add. So that should be out within the next few days. After coordinating that, we are at the end of February. So sometime next week, we should have the top 10 Dawah fails of February. I think that I will call it. So I said, called January the worst month in Dawah history. I think I'll call February the most cowardly month in Dawah history, because we had all the Dawah guys running and crying to the police. It was kind of pathetic. And by kinda, I mean very. I could probably write that script today, since we're at the end of the month. And I've already been, working on gathering the clips and stuff. So should be able to get that out. The 100 ways to respect the Quran is top priority. And potentially pulling together Malik clips is top priority if David wants to do that. But this will be what I'm working on when I'm not working on either of those things. I don't have either of those things to work on today. So I'll be working on this today, writing the script. And then Hopefully get that out this week. Lambert coming in to say hello right as we're wrapping up. Ramadan is the worst month in Dawa history. But yeah, well, that happens every year. Sometimes twice a year since they use the lunar calendar. Probably worst month in Shia history. Yeah, that's a possibility for sure. Then I saved this comment for last because I wanted to talk about this at the end. People like Jay just can't fathom that the proposed reconstructions incur massive evidential costs that must be paid to be taken seriously. And that, in the end of the day, is why I care so much about this. Mary has her own reasons which overlap with mine, but are not identical too. But the most important thing to me is the implication of what this means. If Jay is correct, and we can't know anything about early Islam, or there's not enough evidence, or even stronger, the evidence is that there's a vast conspiracy. Well, you got to be consistent. You got to apply the same methodology. And if you apply the same methodology to anything in history, you're going to get the same conclusion because the methodology is garbage. The methodology is total nonsense, and you can conclude whatever you want about anything in history. You can conclude anything you want about the Roman emperors. You can conclude anything you want about the Persian history. And you can conclude anything you want about the biblical history. And here's the problem, right? It's one thing for Christians it'd be one thing for an atheist to criticize Islam and say we can't know their history, Muhammad is fake, whatever. It would still be wrong, it'd still be idiotic, but it would at least not cause them to have that problem. I have had plenty of atheists tell me when pressed on what their Jesus mythism means, tell me that yes, we can't know anything about ancient history. We just can't know anything about anyone who existed in the 1st century. And while that's a stupid position to take, it is at least consistent. Jay's position is worse because not only is it stupid, it's also inconsistent because he certainly would not apply the same level of scrutiny or method or the same stupid methodology to Christian history. And to be clear, I think absolutely that Jesus and Christianity 100% stand up to history. But if you're going to apply the methodologies of Jay, you might as well say that Christianity was invented at the Council of Nicaea, as people like to do, because it's almost identical level of stupidity being involved in those two hypotheses, what Jay hypothesizes and what people who say Christianity is invented at the Council of Nicaea say. Both are just complete and total fantasy, taking a couple of isolated facts and filling in everything else with your imagination. And that is why I am so opposed to that. This is why I want to speak on this. I think that Christians should stand on what's true. I think Christianity stands up to historical scrutiny. And I think that Muhammad, being a historian,
based?
In no way.
Based?
But many people find it difficult connecting with Allah.
It's backfired on you.
No, that wasn't the bot. So there's two things, or well, there's more than two, but there's two categories of things going on. There's the things triggered by the audience, right? The animations and whatnot, yeah, the dancing cat and the other animations and the couple that have sound involved, and then there's the soundboard, which is triggered by me.
And we're proud of that.
Right? So I can trigger the soundboard.
I think we have to try it first.
So the cat was triggering the soundboard, not the bot. The bot wasn't triggering that. And a couple of people said it was frozen for a second. I don't know what's up with that. Oh yeah, interesting. I'm now seeing the portion where it froze on the replay, because the replay was slightly behind. That's funny. Anyway, I guess it froze for a second there, but that was just an internet glitch or whatever. It was unrelated. And indeed, I guess Allah broke the internet because he's just so mad that Khomeini is dead. So that's the case. Anyway, I do think that this is a very important issue. I do think that Christians need to stand on what's true, and more important, and even more importantly, or equally importantly, whatever, they need to be logically consistent. First, I got a hard end to the stream, but then I remembered you didn't do Pastor Jake. It was just an internet glitch. We're about to close out. We're about to close out. We will close out with Pastor Jake here in just a second. If you haven't checked it out yet, a link to Mary's website, the article that she was going over today, which is hasn't been proofread yet, but what related to what she was talking about today, article to that is linked in the video description. From there, you can go to the website homepage, and she has up about 5 or 6 articles now on Muhammad Mythism, covering stuff that we've previously covered in live streams, but in a different way, different details, and definitely encourage you to check that out if you're the kind of person who likes to read. Very good stuff. I've read every article to help her proofread and whatnot, and I definitely endorse that. I already talked about what's coming up. Other things might pop up, but we know those things for sure. Until we meet again, we will close out with Pastor Jake.
Pray this ceaselessly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me.